I think we always, in history, we tend to like silo things. So like, I don't know, I'm using a poor example, like Hitler and the days of like, Nazi Germany. We think of like that was the only thing going on in the world at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But like there was so much else going on.
Mm-hmm.
So like while the Roman Empire is building and falling, like we have all these different historical figures and like how do they correlate with one? Like I mentioned, like Jesus.
Yeah.
But like I would assume back in the, they probably dismissed Jesus as nothing at first.
During his lifetime, yeah.
Sure. So like they didn't even know who it was. So like what is going on? And maybe my timing is off, but like are there other notable historical figures at the same time that the Roman Empire is rising? Are there other big empires in the world, or are they really the only people to talk about this point?
So I guess the thing to understand, we're recording now, by the way, right?
We're recording. I gotcha.
Yeah, when I was on another show, I was like complaining about my hair in the first 10 minutes of the episode, or me complaining about my hair. I'm like, you were recording that?
Yeah, he got
So I tried to grow my hair out for like a year, and I had this terrible mullet. So half my YouTube comments are just how bad my mullet was. Yeah. But like, you have to understand Rome is like a 2,000-year history. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't get. They just think of Julius Caesar, first emperor, which he wasn't. And they don't realize, it's a kingdom first, then it's a republic, and then it's an empire. So there's a lot of things happening in that period of time. It's founded in 753 BC as a kingdom. Mm-hmm. It lasts as a kingdom until 509 BC. But you have a little bit later down that timeline, during the Roman Republic, you have Alexander the Great existing. Okay. Alexander the Great, he's born in, I think anyway, he dies in 323. So he's born in like 538 or something like that.
What?
And he dies when he's 33 years old.
Oh,
so
okay.
he basically conquers the entire known world. So, and one of his plans towards his end of life was to conquer this, upstart state of the Romans, right? So the world would have been different had Alexander been different. So when he dies, his successors are called the Diadochi, or the successors of Alexander, and they create all these different kingdoms, the Seleucids, the Ptolemies in Egypt. So this is all happening at the time that Rome existed, and Rome isn't really a powerhouse until during and after the Punic Wars, which are in kind of the 3rd and 2nd century BC. So you have Carthage, which is a huge power at this time. Then there's 3 Punic Wars, with Rome, and then basically Carthage is no longer a power, and it eventually becomes a Roman state. So there are a lot of things happening at this time, and you can go later in the timeline. Late Rome, they're dealing with the Huns for a bit. One of the reasons that Romans are dealing with barbarian invasions in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th centuries is because the Huns come out of nowhere. They start invading Roman lands. The Romans are dealing with them slightly. Starts to push these barbarians farther west, and then until the Hun just dies randomly. So, and then they're dealing with the Huns less now. So there's a lot of these powers. There's Persia at the same time. Mm-hmm. There's several different Persian kingdoms which are going to pop up. The Sassanid Persians, which kind of is during the 3rd century, is one of the major powers that Rome is dealing with. But they're dealing with Persia their entire existence. So the world is not just Rome. There's a lot of different things happening at this point in time.
Give us just as far as, and then we'll go back to like the first day. At its peak, which is around like 170 AD, correct?
117.
117 AD. How big is the Roman Empire in comparison to the rest of the world?
So it's most of Central Europe, a lot of Western Europe, a lot of Eastern Europe, part of North Africa, the entire Mediterranean. Actually, the Romans called the Mediterranean Sea Mare Nostrum, which means our sea.
That's sick.
Because it was their sea. Nobody else owned anything else around it. So this empire is massive, and it even goes into parts of Asia. So they had really, at that point in time, conquered large parts of the world. So they were really masters of their world at that point in time.
How much bigger were they than, like, let's say, the second biggest empire of the world?
I wouldn't know what to tell you on that one. I apologize.
What would be the second biggest empire?
During their time? Probably the Persians.
Okay.
But the Persians, like as I said, they have the Achaemenid Persians, which happened during the time of the Greeks and happened during the time of Alexander, and they are a powerhouse.
So Greece is technically Persia at this point.
Parts of it, parts of it are Roman, because after the successor kingdoms are slowly conquered, they're conquered by the Romans. So the Romans are actually taking over a lot of this territory.
Got it.
But the Achaemenid Persians, which are I think they start in like the 600s or 700s BC. And that's what, if you hear the Battle of Thermopylae with the 300, that they're fighting the Achaemenid Persians.
Nice.
Alexander beats the Achaemenid Persians, finishing with Darius III, who's kind of their last big ruler. And they start to fracture a little bit. And then you have different Persian dynasties, which will pop up over time, but they don't really get powerful again, as we're talking about the 320s, 330s BC, they don't get powerful again until like the 200s AD. So it takes like 500 years till they're still there. There's still gradual power structures, but you don't get like a strong Persia again until you get the Sassanid Persians.
Okay. So obviously there's a lot, and my ADHD brain will go all over this. So I'm going to try to we're going to try to concise what is 2,000 years of history into a 2-hour podcast.
Yeah.
It's going to be difficult, but we'll use broad strokes.
Well, and I don't know everything about everything. So there's certain areas that are denser than others.
And that's fine. I just think like it's so intriguing to me, history in general, but this history more so because of how big it was, how powerful it was, how it, even that, as big as it was, got swept under the rug in most cases, and like is no longer a thing. Like it's just a crazy thought that they ruled for so long and so big, and it's now meaningless. So Joe,
meaning like the Roman Empire?
Yeah, just like it's just crazy to me that like now it's boiled down to Italy, which was
Yeah, yes and no, because like it's influenced so much of our culture. You know what I mean? Like, inauguration, the fact that we have an inauguration day, well, that's a Roman term. Augurs were these priests in Rome, their job was to look at the birds, say, okay, based on the bird signs I see today, it's a good day to do this. Or they would take out the liver of an animal and look at this liver and say, okay, good day to do this. Sounds not a good day. Let's get another liver. Let's see how that one's doing.
Yeah.
And that's where inauguration comes from. It comes from the idea that they would look at the bird signs, see if it's a good idea to do this, and that would be the day someone would take political office.
Yeah.
And we do that now in Washington. Every 4 years, we do an inauguration. But we don't look at the bird signs anymore. Or we're the word diocese. The word diocese comes from Diocletian. The Greek version of his name was Diocles, and that's the divisions of the empire that he creates to make it easier to manage. And as the power structure starts to disappear, the Catholic Church takes those because it's something people would recognize.
Sure.
Or even the word salary. Salary comes from the word salarium. Salarium is Latin for salt, and each individual soldier would get his money and a portion of salt because salt was really important. You could preserve food, it could flavor food, and it's where the phrase "worth your salt" comes from.
So
there's so many parts of our culture that it's so ingrained. We say it's we're not pushed by Rome in a lot of ways, but it actually is ingrained in our culture to the point we don't see it.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. That is, and like the irrigation system. So that could be a whole separate podcast. Is how their irrigation system is still alive and well today and still used.
Well, and even what's interesting. So, and we can get into this more later.
Maybe we get into it. All right. Let's.
Well, I just want to say one note on that too, because we'll get into the kind of decline later, but why Britain declines so uniquely is because in 410, Rome itself is sacked. And the Emperor Honorius sends a letter to the Britons saying, hey, guess what? We can't defend you anymore. You guys are kind of on your own. They try to figure out what to do. They hire these guys to basically defend them. They're called the Anglo-Saxons. The Anglo-Saxons then conquer them. The Anglo-Saxons don't read Latin, don't care about Latin. So they actually lost the knowledge on how to fix things like the irrigation system, even though it was written down because they don't read Latin.
Because they couldn't read it.
Yes.
And nobody, didn't have one person that could read this.
It was documented, but there was nobody left that knew how to use it.
Imagine how frustrated they were. They're like, are you joking? It's right here. We can't fucking read it.
That's like when you get the directions book and like half of it's Chinese.
You're like, come on, fuck. So Joe, how big was the Persian Empire in comparison at this point? At the peak.
Oh, what time period though?
At the peak of the Roman Empire.
So around like 117. Yeah, around like the first second century.
I've only got who's the biggest.
Go ahead.
China was Han China was slightly larger than Rome. Territory.
At what time period?
117.
Really?
Well, the Han dynasty it's a massive thing, but here's the interesting part. Other than trade, they wouldn't have known much about each other. And that's what's interesting even about the Anglo-Saxons, is the Anglo-Saxons are the way they are because they actually had no contact with the Romans. So even though the Romans have such a territory, the world's a really big place.
Sure, yeah.
So there's other people that would have, other than trade, not real experience with each other.
So the Han dynasty was bigger than
territory-wise, like
than the
land.
Roman Empire. I wonder people-wise.
Well, even the Mongol territories, you're getting into like the, was it like around 1,000, 12 to 1,100, somewhere around there. Like the Mongol territory is massive.
Yeah, sure.
But that only lasts so long as well, because once again, it's...
maybe it's time of how they... Anyway, all right, let's go back. Let's do this chronologically.
Yeah.
First day, I know there's like a I forget what they call it, like a folk tale of how Rome started, right? The two sons.
Yeah.
So you can share what you think the real impetus of Rome was, and maybe this fake story.
Well, it's interesting too because, like, I guess going back to Augustus, is he's taking over something new. He's trying to take people living in a republic, have them still think they're living in a republic while creating an empire. So one of the major things he also does, and this goes hand in hand with the founding, is he starts to create knowledge that gives people where they came from. So if you look at the Aeneid, which is kind of the famous work, it's the Romans' version of the Iliad or the Odyssey or whatever it might be. And he creates that to give Romans, well, this is where you came from, basically. And the idea of the Aeneid is this guy Aeneas is fighting in the Trojan War, and leaving the Trojan War, he carries his father Ascanius on his back, ends up in a city in Italy called Alba Longa. And from there is supposedly where the actual Roman culture starts, is from the city of Alba Longa. Now, Alba Longa is ruled by a king named Numitor, and Numitor is betrayed by his brother Amulius. And I just remember my history professor in school going, the evil Amulius. But he has, Numitor has this daughter named Rhea Silva. And Rhea Silva is a Vestal Virgin. Now, Vestal Virgin means that they were responsible for keeping the sacred fires going. They're not supposed to get married. They're not supposed to have children. She has two sons, Romulus and Remus. And these two sons are the grandchildren of Numitor. When Amulius hears about this, he wants to have them killed. So what Numitor does is he puts them in a basket and sends them down a river. Sounds a lot like Moses, right? So like a lot of, and that's kind of the zeitgeist of things, how a lot of the way things are spoken about in history are borrowed by different cultures. And they end up being raised by a she-wolf.
Yeah.
It's the idea that they're suckled by a she-wolf. Eventually a farmer finds them and this farmer raises them. And they become strong men, basically, conquering the brigands of the area, making things safer for people. And they decide, once they find out that Numitor, their grandfather, is actually a king, that they're going to conquer Alba Longa and remove Amulius. So they do that. And now they need something else to do because they don't want to be royalty. They've restored Numitor, and they go decide they're going to found a city. So they end up in Rome, and Rome is traditionally built on 7 hills. The Aventine Hill, which is actually the name of my youngest daughter, we named her Aventine, we call her Vivi for short, is where Remus wants to have the capital of the city. Romulus wants to have the capital of the city on the Palatine Hill. So they argue about who's going to be the one to found the city and where. Could you imagine if we had the city of Remus? Right. Romulus kills Remus, and then he founds his civilization on the Palatine Hill in Rome. Now, a problem he has is he's basically built this city from whatever brigands and people he can find, criminals, whoever's around. So it's just him and a bunch of guys. The problem they have now is they don't have any women with which to procreate and extend this civilization. So they invite a neighboring tribe called the Sabines to dinner. And during this dinner, all the men remove all the women from dinner, and you can kind of use your imagination what happens. Since this is going to be on YouTube, they call it the R word of the Sabine women.
You could say it.
The rape of the Sabine women, they call this in history. And that's where the first children of Rome come from the rape of the Sabine women. And the interesting part about it is the Sabine men then decide they're going to rescue the Sabine women. And apparently there's some sort of Stockholm syndrome or something at this point in time. They're like, well, no, these are our husbands now. We had children with them and we procreated with them, and they choose not to leave. And that's where this founding myth of where did Rome come from is where Romulus and kind of these brigands that steal women, create children, and kind of create a new society.
Wow. What an origin story.
What's that?
I said, what an origin story.
Yeah.
And it's just...
And obviously there's a lot more points to that I probably missed, but yeah.
It just goes to show, like, it always has to start with one or two, you know what I mean? And then it procreates. And so, okay, that is the origin as to like what we know it as. Let's talk
now,
about...
we know very little of like how true is that,
Sure.
because once again, I think I sent you a video of Mary Beard. She's one of my favorite Roman historians. Just don't look at her on social issues. She could be a little off on that. But she covers Caesar a lot, but she also seems to hate him at the same time. But she says with Romulus, he's very much this Mr. Rome character. That we don't know whether he gave his name to the city or the city gave its name to him. Because it's a lot of things Romans don't know who to attribute it to. Well, we do it because Romulus did it. That becomes... He's the first of the 7 traditional kings of Rome. And each one, this king invented our tribes, this king invented our religion, because they don't know who to really give these things to.
Yeah.
And that's really where the idea of kind of the foundation of Rome as a culture and as a people come from.
Now, the Roman Empire moving forward is pagan. Did he create this religion as well, or did paganism
Well,
already exist?
supposedly, there's lots of different religions going on at that point in time. You have Zoroastrianism is happening. There's kind of a lot of folk religion. So this supposedly comes from the 7 kings of Rome.
Okay.
I don't remember which one. There is one that is particular. It might be Numa Pompilia, but there's one that is particularly responsible for fostering early Roman religion.
Got it. Okay. So what year is this at around?
So that's 753 is when the actual founding of Rome occurs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Continue.
Well, which part?
Now let's move along for
Yeah.
like the next century. What does Rome look like at this point?
Well, and I think the thing to understand too is if you've seen the movie, what's the Mel Gibson movie where he's a Scottish guy?
Oh my God.
What's that movie?
Yeah.
Braveheart. There we go.
Yes.
So if you want to imagine what Rome looked like in this point in time, it's not a kingdom with like a crown and like it's more like warlords like you would see in the movie Braveheart.
Right.
That's really what you would see. They lived in these wood buildings, thatched roofs. There wasn't any, marble or anything like that yet. And that is really what your 7 traditional kings have. Now, as you get to the last one, his name was Tarquin Superbus or Tarquin the Proud. And Tarquin the Proud has a son that is in the military and decides that one of the guys he's serving with has a wife that's supposed to be the most upstanding woman in Rome. She's very loyal to her husband. She would never do anything wrong. So he decides, I'm going to rape her, is what he decides. Her name is Lucretia. And it's called the rape of Lucretia in history. And this moment is what angers Romans so much that a man named Brutus comes along. Mm-hmm. And Brutus declares himself to be the first consul, helps to remove Tarquin the Proud, and that is the end of the kings of Rome. And then starting with Brutus, you have in 509, you have the Roman Republic, which goes to around, the end is debatable, but 31 to somewhere around 31 to 27 BC.
So we have for about 200 years kings ruling
Yes.
Rome, or what we consider Rome.
Sure.
And is this the woman, correct me if I'm wrong, where she was, like you mentioned, raped and then felt so
She kills
upset
herself.
she killed herself, right?
Yes,
Okay, so
she
I
kills
did
herself.
read that. Got it. So this is like the downfall of the government as it stood, and then now becomes more of a republic.
Yeah, and the typical story is that they're kicked out of Rome. There's other stories that say he was killed, but typically, from what we understand,
That's the last
Brutus
king.
removes him from Rome. He's the last king.
And now, who is Brutus at this point?
Brutus is one of the top citizens, advisor to the king, whatever he might be.
Yeah.
And he's someone that Lucretia is a family friend, so that he's greatly upset about this.
Got it.
And takes it into his own hands in a lot
But
of ways.
is it interesting that he was able to overthrow a king? Like, I'm sure he had support from the people.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It created so much popular support because of what the king's son had done. It was
Got
a
it.
great anger that a king's son could do something like this
Yeah.
to someone else,
So-
and especially for the reason he did it.
Got it. So the king's son does this horrific thing to the woman. The king's son and the king are now taken out.
Correct.
So now where does Rome stand at this point?
So Rome becomes a republic from that point in time. And here's the interesting thing about this is you get Greek democracy around the same time. So the Greeks and the Romans in history kind of fight about who has it first. So the Greeks say we had democracy in 508. The Romans say we had a republic in 509. So we did it first.
Oh, there you go.
And then the Roman Republic goes somewhere around 31 to 27 BC is kind of that period. But the interesting thing about Brutus is the Bruti family that Brutus is be part of is the same family that actually will later on kill Caesar. And there's a whole level of complexity that goes into that. But in terms of what is a consul is, you could imagine it being in modern terms like a president. But they would have 2 every year because we just went through 200 plus years of kings. We don't want another one. Like king became a bad word.
So they're still voting in one individual to rule.
2.
Okay, there's
Yeah,
two
there were
consuls.
2 consuls
Got it.
every year because they didn't want one person to have ultimate power.
And they voted every year on who these consuls were.
Correct. And they held a term of office for 1 year. And date keeping was kind of funny in this period of time. And it doesn't get much better until Caesar does a giant change in the calendar. It's where you get the Julian calendar from. They would actually denote the year by the names of the consuls. So like Caesar, his co-consul is a guy named Marcus Biblius. So the year would have been called the year of Caesar and Biblius. Is how you would denote
That's
the year.
interesting.
And
Okay.
there would be a list of, okay, well, what were you doing in the year of Caesar and Biblius? Okay, well, here's all the things we did that year.
Got it. Now, can you serve for over a year? You have to give up your...
You were supposed to serve... Like cutting something down?
What the fuck is that?
So the consuls were supposed to serve every 10 years. So you would serve for a year, and then you had to basically take a break for 10 years.
And then you can't run again.
Correct. You weren't supposed to.
Okay.
But once again, the interesting thing about Rome is it doesn't have a written constitution. It follows what's known as the mos maiorum, or the ways of the ancestors. So we did it this way because the people before us did it.
Okay.
And the interesting thing is every time a crisis arrives, they add a new way they do things, and it kind of gets added on like a transformer to we do things this way, but hey, this crisis happens now, we also do it this way. So it's an interesting form of government because there isn't a written constitution to follow,
which is almost, I guess there's like pros and cons. Like you look at the Constitution as it is in America, and there's so many things that like we have to follow. But like if the Constitution were written today, there was no way that would be in. You know what I mean? So now we have this debate where it's like it's constitutional, but should it be?
Yeah.
And you can't add to it, you can't take it out, or else you ruin everything kind of.
Yeah, but it's interesting too because then you get I think people forget about the Constitution. Like the Constitution is what the government can't do to you.
Yeah.
I think very often they're saying the Constitution is what you can do. No, it's what the government can't do to you.
Exactly. They should focus more on that because that holds them to right. I'm sure, and it could be like a slow burn, like little by little we start adding.
Well, and Rome does try to handle that in a way. They have something called the 12 Tables, which happens during the mid-Republic, because the problem they start to have is the rich are really taking advantage of the poor.
Got it.
So the 12 Tables become, well, these are the regular written laws we follow, but they also don't handle a lot of how government functions.
Understood. Okay, so Republic starts, the council seems to be working. What is like the size of the Roman Empire at this point?
So it's a good deal of Italy. It's not all of Italy at this point in time. They haven't really taken North Africa yet because that's not going to happen until after the Punic Wars. So really, you're just looking at most of Italy and then a few Greek successor states they've taken.
Are they trying to spread, or they're kind of just happy with where they're at?
So they have an interesting way they do things, because if you look at kind of how the late empire focuses, they're trying to expand for taxes. The way the Republic would expand is they would take over an area and they say, we're not going to tax you if you give us some fighting men. So they were expanding, but not the way they were during the empire. What they would do is they would take over new territory, inherit that territory, say, hey, guess what? You fight for us. We're not going to treat you badly.
Wow.
You could be part of this republic and vote in this republic. Well, citizenship is a whole other debate that's going to come up several times during the Republic. That will eventually be handled in the first century BC. Okay. But they have an interesting system in the way they operate that way. So they're expanding, but not at the rate they're going to expand in the first century BC and the first century AD.
Okay, so the focus isn't necessarily expansion. What is focus, and what is like overall value add to the world at this point?
That's hard to say, because for them, I think it's just kind of existing and having power. It's not, they don't care as much about the world around them.
Like world trade.
Well, there's trade. That's a big part of it. So having trade routes all over the world is important. Until they come up against Carthage, they're not going to care as much about kind of global dominance.
Got it.
But they are taking over some of the successor territories. And there's even some of the successor territories that are, when I say successor, I mean successors of Alexander. There's even one king, I can't remember his name, but he actually wills his kingdom to the Romans when he dies. So they are taking over some of these territories, but not the giant expansion machine you're going to see in the first century BC and AD.
This may be a hard question to answer because I don't know if anybody knows. Is like quality of life for Roman citizens that much better than other areas of the world? Like, was that the place to be?
So I think the thing that's interesting about the Republic, kind of the mid-Republic, let's say early Republic, not so much, but mid-Republic, it's very much a place defended by citizen soldiers. You know, you're fighting to preserve this land that you care about and that you're a part of. And even the classes and divisions they had in Rome were by what you could be in the military. You know, they were called them centuries, these different divisions. So you had the equites, which are the knights, which meant you had enough money to afford a horse and afford the ability to be able to fight from a horse. So even a lot of their political class or their money classes, which they're going to continue to use, actually come from the Republic. So during that point in time, they're defending their homeland. And I would say in that, if you look there, you are in a better position as a regular person. That's going to change throughout time.
Yeah.
But in the mid-Republic, I'd say you're kind of in your best position because the Italians start to get some citizenship. You're fighting for a land you care about because you live there. But the Punic Wars are a really big change in this because the three of them, I compare them a lot of ways to how the War on Terror was for America, where we kind of militarized against one enemy. The whole Roman state militarizes against Carthage. And you even get to the point where Cato the Elder is going to finish every speech in the Senate, even if it had nothing to do with Carthage, with Carthago delenda est, Carthage must be destroyed.
Wow.
It becomes the state must destroy Carthage. It becomes the entire state.
The entire empire.
The entire republic at this point in time. Militarized. Yeah. Well, you could say they start to become an empire territorially, but not in the function of government.
They're still a republic at this point. So are these like, because you say like defending their land, are these almost like individual border wars within the entire republic, or is it like all hands on deck with the entire republic?
It's the entire republic against anybody outside. I think that's what's different when you look at Greece versus when you look at Rome. Greece had a lot of great states, the Athenians, the Spartans, Thessaly. They had a lot of these great states, but they didn't have a united form of government. They had city-states. Yep. Each city was in its own way a state. Rome, they have individual cities, but they work together as a group. And that's why why they're able to do what they're able to do. Greek culture never really unites as one uniting culture. It's it's individualized in each place that it's in.
It'd be like New Jersey fighting a war on its own.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
So now this empire republic is working together where like if the south side was getting attacked, the North would know about it and send troops down, like they were all fighting together.
And the consuls typically would be leading these military incursions.
Cool. Okay. The Punic Wars, you said.
Punic Wars.
Punic, sorry. What year are we in?
So that's the third and second century BC.
Okay, so right around the 300s.
Like 300s, 200s.
So let's fast forward there because not much is going on at this point from 5 to 3.
And I don't know as in-depth about the Punic Wars, but I can give you the kind of overview of it.
Yeah, that's fine. Overview.
And you have kind of the early Punic Wars, which are driven by a guy named, one of the greatest names in history, Hamilcar Barca. And he's going to be leading the first Punic War. Okay. And you have Rome. I think they win the first one, they lose the second one, they win the third one, because then the second one, Hamilcar's son, Hannibal Barca, takes over, and the Romans have a real hard time with Hannibal. There's a battle at Cannae, which will be brought up in Roman history for years and years and years, where the Romans are just, destroyed to a man. Like there's like nothing left.
Where in geographically is this war taking place?
So it's taking place in Sicily, in southern Italy, in North Africa, and kind of that region, because Carthage is near modern-day Tripoli, if you want to kind of see where it is in North Africa.
So they're initiating this war, trying to take over what is the Roman Republic.
Yeah, and I think the thing that people need to understand, too, because a lot of movies you watch, and I think there's even a show on Prime about the places that Rome conquered. And to understand this area, it's actually more Semitic, right? So they would have looked more like Israelis or more like, Syrians or something like that. A lot of those portrayals tend to be like really, really dark skinned. That area wasn't like that yet. That's actually going to happen later during the Arab conquests, when the Arabs are going to come and take over more of this area. And
when you say Arabs taking over part of the nation,
that's way, way later. You're talking during the 520s AD.
Okay,
so we're way down there. The point I'm making is, a lot of the portrayals that you see in movies aren't actually like what it would have looked like. People fighting the Romans wouldn't have looked that much different than the Romans.
But yeah, so the overall question was, this is current day Roman land that is now trying to be taken over by...
Well, so it starts over...
they're not fighting for land that's unclaimed yet.
No, they're fighting over Sicily and Syracuse.
Which is claimed.
Right.
By the Romans.
Well, I believe Syracuse is the island. Sicily is... kind of like in southern Italy. They're fighting over Syracuse, and the Syracusans actually ask the Carthaginians to defend them from the Romans. And that's, it's the other way around. They ask the Romans to defend them from the Carthaginians. And that's kind of how this whole conflict starts, is over the island of Syracuse.
Oh, okay. So Syracuse is its own...
It's its own kind of culture, not really dependent on it's a trading culture, small culture. Yeah. But they start to be having these issues with the Carthaginians, and they ask the Romans to defend them. Maybe the Romans made that up to sound better, maybe. So that's kind of where this whole thing kicks off.
Understood. Okay.
And then it takes, hundreds of years of them fighting for who's going to come on top. And then in the Third Punic War, you have, I think it's Scipio Africanus that ends up actually defeating Hannibal. Hannibal's actually going to go serve for the Persians later on after he's actually removed from Carthage. So Carthage is destroyed to the point that the Romans actually burn it down and salt the land. Salted because Carthage.
Okay.
So they defeat them to that point. So now you could say in a lot of ways Rome is the sole superpower after this point because they've destroyed Carthage, who was the greatest shipping power on the planet at that point in time. Their greatest trading city.
And where was Carthage at this point again?
It's in North Africa. It's founded by Phoenician traders. Okay. And it's going to become kind of its own state, but from Phoenician traders.
Okay, so the Roman Republic take over the Syracuse island and then also parts of North Africa at this point.
Most of it, yeah.
It's crazy to think, and then we'll keep going. Sidebar, like wars happen in modern day. The thought of like a country just like taking over and conquering a land now, like imagine we're like, yeah, we want Canada and like we're going to take it from you guys. And now it's our land. Like this is a wild thought.
But here's the interesting thing about that is I think we feel like we're too civilized in a modern world. Do you know what I mean? Like that those things don't happen anymore. But you go back to, you look at the map from 1945 versus now. There's Czechoslovakia used to be a country,
and
but now it's the Czech Republic and Slovakia. The map has changed dramatically, but it really hasn't happened in the past, little less than 100 years. Like for us, this world has been stasis in a lot of ways.
It would be a wild thought. And maybe it's like size, like if a smaller country took over another small country and they morphed into one, you wouldn't really think about it. But if a country like Russia took over a country, you'd be like, well, that's a huge deal. And how do we stand for this as the United Nations and the world? But things happened. I don't know. It's a wild thought.
And I think people also looked at it differently too, because if you look at, people seem to care less about empires in a lot of ways. And empires were kind of the way of doing things earlier on, where that was just pretty typical. There would, in kind of the ancient world, the medieval world, they'd have campaigning season. We would fight wars in the summer and the spring, but you don't want to fight them in the winter because it gets cold and people die.
Well, I guess and also, it
was a bigger part of their culture. They fought war as part of culture.
I guess and maybe I'm wrong, but the power dynamic of the world now, like we are as America a gigantic powerhouse of the world, but we also have other powerhouses that are like, if we were to start taking over land, we'd have wars that are fought in sea, in the air, like very different than Rome trying to slowly but surely expand what they can only touch.
Yeah, because even as Rome's falling, not falling, but before that, if you want to go when they're having trouble kind of keeping things together in the 3rd century, it would take an emperor a month to figure out something was happening, another month to send troops there to actually handle it. Yeah. So things move so slowly, right? So that's these military incursions were slow and long.
Yeah, correct. So maybe it didn't feel as dramatic as us saying, hey, we're going to take over Canada tomorrow.
Correct.
Okay, so now we're in like 300, 250 BC. The Punic Wars are over. The results are
the Romans finally win after the 3rd one. Okay. Hannibal goes off to serve elsewhere because he's not really welcome in Carthage anymore. I don't remember if it's the Persians but he serves another big society at this point in time. There's a book by Adrian Goldsworthy called Roman Persia. I'd recommend people read that if they want to learn more about that era. It's something I know less about, but it's important to understand. But so you get after that, and I think it's around 150 is when the last Persian Wars. It's somewhere in the 2nd century. The Republic starts to change after this period of time because now you have these strong men type characters. And one of my favorite books that if people have the attention span, I would recommend they read is called The Roman Revolution by Dr. Ronald Syme. And it discusses this last 100 years of the Roman Republic. And the thing that changes is you get these military strongmen. And people see Caesar, towards the end of the 1st century, and they think that that's something that just kind of happened in a vacuum. But you actually have each individual person breaking laws, right? Someone breaks some laws, someone breaks a few more. By the time you get to Caesar, there's nothing left to break. Yeah. And that's how you kind of look at the last 100 years of the Roman Republic. And interestingly enough, it's where some of the most famous Romans you've heard of come from. You have the Gracchi brothers in 133. Tiberius Gracchus fought in the Punic Wars. He's on his way back to Italy, and he observes the countryside. And something that he notices is a lot of soldiers have lost their land because they've been fighting these wars forever. They come back and their land was either taken over, sold for taxes, whatever it might be. So they don't have any place to go. And so he's observing this, and there's something that for the first time in Roman history they're seeing, which is landless poor, because they were naturally an agrarian society. You would be farming, taking care of your land, feeding yourself, feeding your community, and these people would come back and have nothing. So he's trying to figure out, like, well, what do you do with this? So one of the big things he wants to do is land reform. He wants to figure out, how do we give some of this new land we've acquired to these veterans that are coming back, that their land is just gone. It's been taken over by someone else, or a rich family is farming it, or it might be. And he wants to figure out, well, how do we feed this landless poor? So he starts something called the grain dole. And the idea behind the grain dole is they would offer discount grain. It wasn't free at that point in time. It'll be free later on. But just an ability to feed yourself and be able to produce for yourself. And this is very upsetting to the senatorial class. And he's actually killed by senators, beaten to death with legs of a stool outside of the Senate House.
Whoa.
10 years later, his brother Gaius Gracchus is going to try very similar things.
Also gets killed.
Also gets killed. One story says that he was also beaten to death. Another says that he knew they were coming, so he asked his slave to kill him because he didn't want to kill himself.
Now, why is the Senate so upset about this?
Because the Senate wants to have ultimate power, right?
Yeah.
It's you have to look at the division of the Senate is made up of the richest and most prosperous families in Rome.
Got it.
So they're not going to want to change the status quo because the status quo is good for them.
So there is there is a huge divide between classes, like the
There
upper
is,
and then lower.
and there starts to become this political divide between the optimates, or the great ones, which is kind of the great senatorial families, and the plebeians, right? So you have this real great divide between who has money and who doesn't. The political class for the plebeians is called the populares, doing things for the populace.
And their lives were very poor.
It was about survival. It was about being able to feed your family, and they're not as worried about what's happening in the political landscape. A lot of them couldn't read either. You have about 10% of the populace that's literate, and those are the 10% that are making up laws.
Which is crazy because like history is written by the ones who can write and read. It's like you had the Roman Empire was grandiose and huge, but like for these people, it probably sucked. Like their lives were not great lives
for the most part.
And
Yeah,
they lived in like the time
it's
of
survival. It's survival. Being able to feed your family, being able to live. Lifespans for them would not be that long because you had disease, you had all sorts of other things going around. Sanitation was terrible.
Yeah.
Because you hear about Roman sanitation, and it was like, if you had money, sanitation was great.
Yeah.
They had toilets, they had all these different things. Regular people would go to the bathroom in a copper pot and throw it in the street.
Yeah. How much of a difference, like population size, was let's call it the senatorial class and then the plebes, you call them? Plebes, right?
Yeah.
Like how many of them comparison to how many
Well, they would
people were?
overwhelm them dramatically, but at the same time, the more powerful had all the military power, because there also starts to be some military reforms during this point in time.
Got it.
So that's what I'm talking about. Like this last 100 years, things changed dramatically, right? So you have these reforms happen with the Gracchi brothers. Not long after that, you have Gaius Marius, and he actually does these enormous military reforms.
What year are we in? I'm sorry.
So this is around the year 100.
Okay.
And
BC.
BC. And one of the things that Marius does is now we have this landless poor problem. We also have a giant upset about citizenship, because you had people that were living in the Roman Republic, but they weren't Roman citizens. They were just Italians, and they want to have citizenship. So one of the big things he fights for is to help get to citizenship for the Italians. And that will eventually be achieved, but it's one of the giant things he's fighting for. He's also trying to solve, like, what do we do with these guys? And that's where Rome goes from more of a citizen soldiery to a professional military class.
Now, sorry for cutting off. Why do you call it Italians if Italy isn't founded yet?
So Italians were the tribes that were living there. They called themselves Italians. That's where the word comes from.
Interesting.
Yeah, cool. So the Italian tribes.
Was in like what we now consider
in the peninsula, but they lived in Rome, but they didn't have citizenship. So it's a kind of a big upset of who gets to have citizenship.
And my next question.
These are lands that they had conquered and brought in, and like they're living in Rome, but they don't have citizenship, and which meant they didn't have political representation and things like that.
That was my question. What does citizenship actually get you?
Political representation, the ability to vote. It also got you the joy of being taxed, all those fun things. So
nice.
it has pluses and its minuses.
Okay, cool. So now let's go from 100 BC to now let's say it's the start of AD.
Yeah. So if you look at what Marius does, so he tries to handle this citizenship question. he also changes the way the military is. He's seen as Rome's second founder, because one of the things he does is he reforms the military in such a way that he changes their fighting style, he changes their fighting formations. He institutes the Roman standard, the gold eagle that everybody's familiar with. That's a Marius creation. And he makes the military a private military, well, not private military force, but a professional military force, something that your career could be being a soldier. You didn't just farm and then go to fight when something bad was happening. You were a soldier.
Yeah.
So that is a giant change. And now it's not people defending their land. It's people that their job is to serve in the military.
Got it.
Which is what Rome had been before that. You would be farming, something would come up, you would go serve, you'd handle whatever the problem was, you'd come back and keep farming. So he changes that there is now a permanent standing military force in Rome.
Okay.
And then he also holds the office of consul 7 times.
Whoa.
He doesn't hold his first one at 10 years old, though he does live to be close to 70. So he's breaking the rules of office that he was supposed to wait 10 years between every consulship.
How does he get away with that?
He gets away with it because he had been such a successful general that people demand it, right?
Yeah.
Like, Marius, save us. And
Interesting.
Once again, it's people will sacrifice their liberty for security, right? And it's they thought Marius could save them, so they're willing to have that happen. There's a military conflict that comes up against a tribe called the Cimbri. And the Cimbri are run by this guy named Jugurtha, who's kind of like their warlord king. Marius has a guy serving in his military military named Lucius Sulla. And Sulla actually institutes the capture of Jugurtha. Marius takes full credit for the capture of Jugurtha, celebrates his triumphal parade, gets all the credit, and there starts to be this rift that develops between Marius and Sulla, which is going to go out between all-out civil war between the two, to the point that Sulla actually is given the office of consul. It's voted for him, but then the Senate takes it away, gives the office to Marius. Sulla actually pushes Marius out of Rome, and then Sulla pushes Marius out of Rome, and then Marius will actually die in Greece of old age.
Oh.
So then, this is around 82, and there was an office in Rome called dictator. And dictator was this office you could hold for 6 months. You would hold ultimate power. There wouldn't be 2 consuls at that point in time. There would be the dictator, and then I guess what would take the place of his co-consul but wouldn't be as high as him would be something called the Magister Equitum, or the master of horses. It was like his second in command. And for 6 months, ultimate power. Could do whatever they wanted to do to solve a crisis. And the one that's often used as the exemplar of this is a guy named Cincinnatus. And that's what, if you ever heard George Washington is called the American Cincinnatus, the guy that handles the crisis, serves for a bit, and goes back to farming, right? So Cincinnatus, twice in his life, when he's a young man, he's declared dictator, solves a military crisis, and goes back to farming. As an old man, serves as dictator again, serves for 6 months, goes back to farming. So it's seen as the exemplum. Mm-hmm. The thing that Sulla does that's different is he's declared dictator for the restoration of the Republic. And he holds this power not for 6 months, but for almost 4 years.
Oh.
And during this period of time, he holds ultimate power. And one of the things that he does that was very different than what Rome had experienced before is a process called proscription. What proscription meant is there would be a list of names in the forum. If your name was on that list, you were legally allowed to be killed by anyone that wanted to kill you. And these were all important senatorial families, people that Sulla didn't like, people that were politically inconvenient for Sulla. Anybody that's an enemy of Sulla was on these proscription lists.
He could kill them?
He could kill them. Anybody could kill them. And here's the interesting thing is if you killed somebody, well, you might be able to get their stuff. That's kind of a very valuable
like
thing.
a hit list.
Yes, it's like a hit list in a lot of ways. And there's a story about one very rich man saying that, he was going to be killed for his farm. Because somebody else wanted his land. They're going to make sure he's on the prescription list, even though he's not an enemy of Sulla, because somebody wants his farm.
Now, sorry, maybe I'm a little confused. What happened to the council? I thought there was 2 people representing the...
During the dictatorship, there isn't.
So, this is what created the dictatorship.
Correct. There's a dictator. When a dictator would be declared to solve an emergency. And during that period of time, there would not be a consul. The dictator, because as I said, the consul, there's 2 of them. So you have co-consuls. The dictator would have a colleague called a master of horse, but he wasn't as powerful as a dictator. He's kind of like his second in command in a lot of ways. So still 2 guys, but one guy's in charge and one guy's behind him.
And how long does this dictatorship period of time last?
For Sulla, it's 4 years.
Okay.
From 82 to 78.
Got it. Cool.
And so Rome changes dramatically in this period of time. He's going to change the rules around the office of tribune of the plebs, because tribune of the plebs was one of the main offices that could propose and veto laws, and had been something that especially the Gracchi brothers, a regular person could use to rise to political power really quickly. And because if you remember the political classes I was talking about of the optimates, the powerful ones, the senatorial families, and the populares, he was trying to keep populares somewhat out of government by doing that, because it was a way that someone who didn't have a lot of power could quickly rise to this office of tribune of the plebs.
Got it. Okay.
So he doesn't remove the office, but he removes a lot of the powers that would make somebody want to have it. He doesn't want that office to become powerful again. So he greatly changes who's in the Senate by these proscriptions. It becomes a lot of Sulla's men. And for a 4-year period, Rome changes dramatically. And you have to imagine what the tenure in the city was like, to think that your name could end up on a list. And if it was advantageous to someone or you were an enemy, you're in trouble. There's an 18-year-old named Julius Caesar that ends up on these proscription lists, because Caesar's wife was a relative of Marius, and Sulla wanted Caesar to divorce his wife.
Right.
And there's a whole story with this, but basically Caesar's mother, through another family relation, manages to get him taken off of those proscription lists. And it's just Caesar, Sulla might have had a negative opinion of him, but history-wise, because history is a lot of times written postscript, it's said that Sulla looked at Caesar as someone he thought was very dangerous. He likely may not have even known who he was, in all honesty. Yeah. But Caesar is actually on these proscription lists as an 18-year-old. He was holding a religious office called the Flamandialis, which is basically like a minor religious office where it was something you would hold for life. You couldn't serve in the military. There were other various things that controlled your life. So with somebody that to Sulla, this guy just shouldn't be married to this person, because I don't see it advantageous for me.
Understood. So you said the Roman Empire or dictatorship changes drastically in these 4 years. What does typical Roman life and culture look like at this point? Are we building these massive buildings, and do we have irrigation yet? Do we have marble? You're
not going to have a lot of that stuff yet. And even the story about Augustus is he says that I found Rome a city of wood, and I left it a city of marble.
Yeah, I do.
So it's not going. You see the movies, you read the books, whatever it might be. It doesn't look like they want to show you in a lot of the books. Actually, Rome was probably largely wood even when Caesar lived.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so it's still I don't want to say run down, but it doesn't look as glamorous as we maybe picture it.
A lot of that comes from Augustus and the early emperors.
Okay, so continue. So now we're in year 70 BC.
This is 78.
78.
So then he dies, and Rome is kind of an interesting place at that period of time, because it's never going to be the republic it was before that, but there's attempts to kind of keep the republic going in the way it had been. A lot of laws have been broken. One of the guys in his military is a guy named Pompey the Great. Pompey the Great's a very interesting character. He really, really wants to be Alexander the Great. That's where he even convinces Sulla to give him the cognomen, which is the extra name of Magnus, Pompey the Great. Yeah. He was just Gaius Pompeius before that. Yeah. Or Gnaeus Pompeius before that. And the thing that he does is really advantageous to Sulla is his family is very wealthy. So he has his own private military force that he can pay for.
Wow.
So he was allowed to do things from a very young age. The trope about him was that, he was basically leading an army before he could even shave. So he's a very interesting character, and he was getting his first triumph at an age that he was too young to celebrate his first triumph. He holds his first consulship well before the age he's supposed to be to hold his first consulship. So he's kind of the next guy in this whole breakdown. If you want to go a little bit further along and bring Julius Caesar into the situation, he holds his consulship in 59.
Who does?
Julius Caesar.
Okay.
And his co-consul is a guy named Marcus Biblius. And Caesar's an interesting character because he's broke his entire life. He comes from a patrician family where he's got an important name, but he's broke. His father died young, lost a lot of money in land speculation. So he's got a great name, but he's living in the wrong side of town. And he's able to do the things he does because he borrows a lot of money his entire career. And Marcus Crassus is one of the guys that he owes a lot of money to his career. So each time Caesar makes a political move, it's because if I don't win this election or if I don't get this position, I'm screwed because I now owe this guy a lot of money and I don't have the way to create the money for him.
Got it.
So he gets his first consulship in 59, and he has a political enemy at that period of time, this guy named Cato the Younger. If you remember our friend Cato the Elder during the Punic Wars, Carthago delenda est, Carthago delenda est, same family, just not as impressive. And he's a very, very hyper-conservative guy. He dresses very modestly, and he does not want to make a lot of changes in law. And he just does not get along with Caesar. So every law Caesar proposes, Cato figures out a way to block that law.
And what is Cato's position at this point?
He's just a senator at this point in time.
Got it.
I don't know if he's princeps senatus yet, prince of the Senate, but he's basically a important senator at this period of time.
But doesn't Caesar take precedence over the Senate at this point?
So the Senate would advise the consuls. Consuls, the Senate didn't actually pass any laws. They made recommendations.
But he still has the overall say, the council.
For the year, for the consul for the year he does.
Gotcha.
So his co-consul is basically propped up by Biblius, or Biblius is propped up by Cato.
Got it.
And it gets to the point where he's trying to pass laws. Cato's trying to figure out a way to block him. So Caesar has the power to go directly to the people for a vote. And it gets to the point that he's passing laws with the help of the people, and Biblius isn't able to do anything. He's actually chased into his home for the rest of his year as consul, Biblius, and does not function in government. So it's called the consulship of Julius and Caesar. For 1 year, Caesar holds ultimate power. He's not a dictator. He has a co-consul, but his co-consul isn't really functioning.
So he's basically a dictator.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. So he's working on land reforms. He's working on standardizing the grain dole. He's doing a lot of these different things. And after his year as consul, he becomes what's called a proconsul. So that means consular power outside of the city of Rome. And that's the 9 years that he spends in Gaul, killing upwards of 1 million people, conquering parts of Germany and France and going as far as Spain. And he actually enlarges the Roman territory dramatically.
Okay. And this is the year, what year?
This is 15 at the end of 59 until around the year 49 or 50.
Okay.
He starts to hear as his term as proconsul is ending that Cato the Elder or Cato the Younger wants to bring him up on charges. Because there's this trope in Rome that, you needed 3 years in political office. Your first was to get out of debt. Your second was to build wealth. And your third year was to avoid prosecution. So he has this idea that if I go back to Rome, they're going to bring me up on charges. When you're consul, you couldn't be held for political charges for the year you were consul.
Okay.
To be voted for in Rome, you actually had to show up in person. So he petitions the Senate to be voted for in absentia for consul. It's approved. Cato manages to get that blocked and removed. So now he has to show up in person again.
Oh, boy.
So he gets to the river Rubicon with 10 legions, leaves 9 there, crosses with 1. Cato, Pompey, and all the senatorial families that are a problem for him flee the city.
Why?
They're afraid of Caesar. He's coming with a military.
Oh, so they knew.
So they flee the city. Cato's later going to commit suicide. Pompey's going to be killed by the Ptolemaic king. And Caesar is the last man standing because everyone else literally runs away.
Well, now, like, the expectation of what? He was going to come back and kill them all?
I guess they thought that because he had military.
Wow.
Because the way their culture worked is you were supposed to disband your legions before you entered the city of Rome. There's a sacred line around the walls of the city of Rome called the Palmarium. Okay. And within the Palmarium, you weren't supposed to have men under arms. And this was even a problem with Pompey because Pompey always had a standing army that he typically would refuse to enter the city because he couldn't bring soldiers with him.
Wow. So you couldn't bring armed soldiers into the city?
Correct. And if you disbanded those legions, you'd have to form legions again. That could take months or years, whatever it might be.
Wow.
So they didn't want to give up that power.
Okay.
Because to have that military was power.
So the Senate leaves. Now he's the sole ruler.
Correct.
And his co-counsel is also gone?
His co-counsel is gone.
Is dead.
Consul is gone.
Consul, okay.
I don't know if he's dead at this point in time, but he's no longer in power because once again, that was 10 years ago.
Got it. So it's just
when he's proconsul, he's holding the power by himself.
Okay.
He enters the city of Rome. They've all left.
Wow.
And he's then dictator for short spurts until 44 when he's named dictator for life, but 44 is when he's going to die. So,
wow.
Yeah.
How does he die?
That's an interesting one too because Shakespeare likes to have a lot of fun with that one. The whole et tu brute, which probably never happened. Caesar probably likely said, was more what he said. enters the Senate chamber. Supposedly his wife the night before has a dream telling him it's not a good idea to go. She's trying to convince him not to go to the Senate chamber. He goes, and the two that get the credit for it are Brutus and Cassius, which basically organize this thing. But he's stabbed by many, many senators. And, he's stabbed 30 or 40 times. Yeah. And that is the end of Julius Caesar.
Isn't there a specific number that they say he was stabbed?
There is. I don't remember offhand, though.
Joe, look up the number of how many times Julius Caesar was stabbed. I think it's like, I want to say 34. That's my guess.
I don't remember the exact number offhand.
But now this Senate is a whole new Senate, correct?
Yeah. It's basically Sulla's men and the families of Sulla's men that are still there.
Oh, so that's why they took him out.
Yeah.
Because they're members of Sulla's family.
Yeah. And not just Sulla's family, but Sulla's loyal people.
Got it. Joe, what do we got?
And I apologize for jumping around in some of these explanations.
No, this is perfect.
But it's like a spider's web.
This is as, I think, easy to follow as you could possibly.
Because it's like a spider's web. You know what I mean? Like you have to know this to get this to get this. Yeah. And these YouTube comments, I'm still going to get so much hate that I skipped this or said this wrong. Or whatever it might be.
What do we got, Joe?
23.
23 times he stabbed.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a weakling.
Yeah.
10 more times than Tory Lanez.
Damn. What a pussy. Okay, so he's dead.
Yes.
Now what?
So then Caesar's will comes about. And his second in command at this point in time is Marcus Antonius, that we call Mark Antony in history. So Mark Antony believes, okay, well, Caesar's dead. I'm his second in command. I'm going to be the guy, right? I'm going to be the guy. So then Caesar's will is read aloud because I get yelled at for saying this. So Caesar did have children, but they're all dead by this point in time. His daughter Julia has died. He may have had sons, but they were illegitimate. So he has no sons or children that could inherit. So in his will, because in the past I've said Caesar didn't have any children, which he did, but they're dead, so it doesn't matter. Right. So he ostensibly didn't have children. In his will, he recognizes his great nephew, Gaius Octavius, is basically going to get his name, his titles, any of his political positions, his wealth. And from that moment, Gaius Octavius will start calling himself Julius Caesar.
Is that why now they're all known as like Caesar blank, right? Isn't it like that's the emperor name?
I think it's more or less because the name becomes a title eventually.
Right. That was my question.
Yeah, I don't know exactly when that transformation takes place. I would say it's probably sometime after the Julio-Claudians, which is the first dynasty of the empire, that they want to seem legitimate, because adoption was something that would be used to handle somebody that illegitimately didn't have power. So like Augustus then becomes Julius Caesar. At this point in time, he's Gaius Octavius.
Gaius Octavius is his real name.
Yeah, there's like 5 first names you could have in Rome.
These names are
Gaius,
wild.
Marcus. There's very few first names you could have. So that's why we call them, Julius or things like that. But his name is actually Gaius Julius Caesar.
So Gaius changes his name to Julius Caesar
because he was legally allowed to do that, because he was adopted.
Understood.
After the death of Caesar, but in Caesar's will. Okay. So at this point in time, you could call him Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus. We know him as Octavian. Great name.
Phenomenal. So now he's full dictator.
He's not dictator. Okay. He's not dictator. Him and Mark Antony, along with a guy named Marcus Lepidus, create what's called the Second Triumvirate. The first triumvirate was that year when Caesar was in power, his consulship. He was basically, the two guys he was working with were Pompey the Great and Crassus, who was the guy that owed all, Caesar owed all the money to. So Caesar's ostensibly doing all the political actions, but those three were basically making all decisions for that year. They called it the First Triumvirate. They called this the Second Triumvirate. And Lepidus really doesn't have that much power. It's basically Mark Antony and Augustus that have all the power. Okay. So the first thing they're going to do is chase down the assassins of Caesar and have them killed. They're also going to have their own process of proscriptions at this point in time too, because there's a lot of guys they don't like that are still in power. One of the guys that meets his death here is one of the most famous orators and writers in Roman history, which is Cicero. Cicero is going to meet his death as part of these proscriptions. I believe he was on Antony's list because him and Antony really didn't get along, even though Augustus had a special relationship with him as a child. So Cicero meets his death here. And then you start to have the two of them starting to not see eye to eye, meaning Augustus, who is still not Augustus yet, but just so we understand who he is, and Mark Antony. Mark Antony is going to go to Macedonia because he's going to just start trying to handle Rome's legions there, because they divide the republic between themselves. You get this part, I get this part. He's going to go live there. I'm going to go live there. So then Mark Antony will eventually end up in Egypt, and that's where he gets connected to Cleopatra. Right. Cleopatra, who, by the way, had also had a child with Julius Caesar.
I heard that.
Who they called Caesarion. Okay. whole nother, as I said, it's a spider's web. We could go off in other directions for years.
Yeah.
But there ends up being this bad blood between Augustus, who is still Octavian at this point in time, and Mark Antony. So then Augustus starts taking military action against Cleopatra.
Why?
Because he wouldn't want to be seen as taking military action against another Roman.
Why is he taking action against her?
Because he's basically created a fervor against Mark Antony.
Doesn't want to say it though.
Right. He doesn't want to say it because that wouldn't be seen as honorable, right? To go after another Roman. Because then if you go after another Roman, well, you're Sulla, right? Because Sulla went after...
Okay.
And though Sulla did a lot, people still don't like him, right? You know, to be dictator for 4 years wasn't acceptable. It wasn't how Romans did things. Okay. So he's seen as a rebel with Cleopatra. Okay. And the master of propaganda starts working. You know, he's going to will his children with Cleopatra, the Roman Republic. They're going to be taking over. His intention is to take over the Roman Republic. He's going native. He's dressing. Have you ever seen the series Rome on HBO?
No.
You got to see it.
Yeah.
The portrayal of Mark Antony on there is probably just Augustan propaganda, but they show him like with his eyes painted and wearing Egyptian robes because that's what Augustus is telling the people in Rome. You know,
he's closer vicinity wise.
Yeah, so he's gone native. They want to deify themselves. They want to be the new kings of Rome. You know, do you really want this guy in charge? And so he gets authorized to take military action against Cleopatra, but he's doing that to take military action against Mark Antony.
Now, where is Cleopatra physically at this point?
Egypt.
Okay, and the plan is what?
Memphis would have been like kind of their main city they're ruling from, which is in Egypt.
Okay, and the plan is now take over Egypt?
It's not to take over, it's to defeat Mark Antony. Okay. They're eventually going to get Egypt, but right now it's just defeat Mark Antony and defeat Cleopatra. Because for him, that's somebody that would have the ability to take power from him, and he wants power.
It's like a preemptive attack.
Correct. He's taking out anybody that could oppose him in a lot of ways. And that's the next big opposition, is to remove Mark Antony. Okay. So the two of them fight a battle over several years. The final battle is at the city of Actium, which is, I believe, in Greece.
Sorry for cutting off, because where the Roman military, they gotta be on one side or the other. Like, where's both?
Because remember, the last 100 years we start to have personal loyalty, where so you're loyal to the general that you're fighting for.
Interesting.
So his legions would have went with him. So you're going to have Romans fighting against Romans.
It's like a civil war.
Correct. It is a civil war in a lot of ways. That's what's interesting about the change. Goes back to, as I said, it's like a spider's web. You can jump all over the place. But this is what's interesting about the change in Marius, changing how the military functions. Because before, you were loyal to Rome because Rome was where you lived and it was your territory. Men start being responsible to a general because the general pays them. And they're loyal to that man, right? So that, and even when Julius Caesar dies, his legions end up fighting for Octavian because, well, he's the new Julius Caesar. Sure. We're loyal to Caesar, and this guy's going to pay us.
So I'm assuming Augustus's military is way bigger.
They're way bigger. They're better trained, right? And they have more guys that were more seasoned, if that makes sense.
Got it.
And because they had fought with Caesar in Gaul, they had they had been with Caesar for a long time.
Yeah.
So Antony has his legions, and they are Roman. So it is Romans fighting Romans.
Interesting.
But the final battle is actually a naval battle at Actium, and here's the interesting thing about Augustus is for everything he does, he didn't fight his own battles. He was able to do what he did because of a man named Marcus Agrippa. And Marcus Agrippa, which to me, he's a very interesting character because he seems just very happy being number two. You know, I could imagine, Dr. Evil next to him, number two. He seems to be very happy just being that guy. Right. And he fights Augustus's battles for him. And at the Battle of Actium, they beat Mark Antony and Cleopatra. They run away from the battle. Cleopatra is going to commit suicide by an ass bite. Mark Antony, because she thinks Mark Antony is dead, turns out he's not dead, so then he kills himself as well. So now there's no more enemies of Augustus. He's able to actually hold a triumph. And the reason supposedly that Cleopatra kills herself is because when you win a battle as a Roman, you have a parade called a triumph. And that parade would be, you'd be bringing, the booty, the things you won in war, the gold, the silver. And you'd also bring in chains the people you beat. So she didn't want to be in a triumphal parade.
Wow.
Because that would have been greatly embarrassing.
Yeah.
So she likely committed suicide to not be in his triumph.
Wasn't Cleopatra, how old is she when she
I don't know, to be honest with you.
I feel like she was old. Maybe I'm wrong. Joe, how old
I don't know.
Cleopatra? Was she
I
at?
would say she's in her 30s or 40s at this point in time. I don't know if she's.
So that's an average.
It's like an
age.
average age. Like Julius Caesar's in his mid 50s when he dies. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
$39.
39.
Okay, there we go.
69 BC. Oh, wait. No, she was born 69 BC and died August 12th, 30 BC.
That's crazy.
So she's like 38.
Okay. And how'd you say she killed herself?
By an asp bite. An asp is a poisonous snake.
Okay. Interesting. I heard ass bite. I was like, what?
No,
the
asp,
fuck?
not ass.
That's what I was like, okay.
The asp bit me.
That was like, holy shit. Okay. So she commits suicide.
Yeah.
To avoid public humiliation.
Yeah.
Understood. He takes over and now there's really no enemies for him to even fight.
Well, here's the interesting thing. So this is in 31, and then you have to think with people have had civil war for almost 100 years, right? Like, whether it's this strongman, that strongman, they have their own militaries, they're fighting each other. One thing I skipped about Sulla is he was the first man to raise an army and march on Rome. That's how he gets the power of dictator. They don't give it to him, he takes it.
Wow.
So people have been very beaten down by this point in time.
Got it.
And Octavian, who's going to be Augustus soon, has brought them peace, right? Like they've had civil war. Would you want the guy that just gave you peace to go away?
No.
So he does the masterful trick of, great, I brought you peace. I'm going to retire. I don't want power. I'm going to retire.
Yeah.
So what happens?
You tell me.
So we have a new name for you. It's Augustus. Please don't leave us.
Oh, so just changed his name. So now he's unretired.
So now doesn't retire. He's given this name of Augustus, the revered one. So now he's Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus, which is we're pretty much going to call him Augustus for simplicity from here.
Okay.
And this is where he gets really smart, because now he's looking at Romans don't like kings. Caesar is likely killed because there was the idea he could be a king. And this is something they fear greatly. So I want to be a king. I could be a king, but I'm not going to call myself a king. How do we do this? So the most victorious general in Rome, they use the word imperator. It's where actually the word emperor comes from, but he takes that title of the victorious general. He also takes the title, the man that always spoke first in the Senate. You could think of him like their version of the Speaker of the House. Okay. They called them the princeps senatus, or the prince of the Senate. So he calls himself the princeps civitas, basically the first citizen. Okay. Just like you, just a little bit better, right? So the word that he's actually going to use for himself is princeps. Okay. In history, we call them emperors, but they would have called themselves princes.
Princes. Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
So then he pulls in other powers. He pulls in the power of the Pontifex Maximus, which is the chief priest of Rome. So now he's the victorious general. He's the prince. He's the chief priest. He pulls in the power of the tribune of the plebs. So the power to propose and veto laws. He also pulls in the power of censor. That means he can manage public morals. They can count all the people that live there. They can remove and add people from the Senate. It's where we get our word census from, is from the idea of censors.
So this is very transformative this time.
Yes. So he pulls all of these powers to this new position that hadn't existed before, the princeps.
Okay. Side note, because there's the web, is the Colosseum built yet?
No.
Oh, God. All right. I can't wait to get there.
That's going to be somewhere around the late 60s, kind of early 70s.
Okay. I have some time. Okay.
It's called the proper name is the Flavian Amphitheater.
The Flavian Amphitheater. But there was a bigger one. There was a bigger Colosseum.
Well, there's ones outside of Roman territories, but there's some that still exist.
But there was the bigger one that held like 150,000 people that was destroyed. What was it called? The Circus something?
Well, the Circus Maximus, everything.
Yes. Yeah,
they serve different purposes. The Circus Maximus already existed. The Circus Maximus was a horse racing track.
Okay.
And you can actually, I have pictures on my phone, but you can actually go and walk around it now in Rome.
But it's like flat, isn't it?
It's flat. There's not much there. You can kind of see like, hey, there might have been a stand here.
Right.
So the Circus Maximus
But they didn't have gladiator fights.
No, the Circus Maximus and the Colosseum served different purposes.
Got it. All right,
the Colosseum was for gladiator fights, where the Circus Maximus were, have you ever seen the movie Ben-Hur? These giant horse races with these wide chariots and 4 or 5 horses. Okay. Yeah, it's a little bit of a different purpose.
Okay, interesting. All right, continue.
And even the chariot teams in themselves were interesting because they were chariot teams named after colors that also doubled as political parties. So it's
too much going on. Continue.
Yeah. So where was I?
You were talking about Augustus now, like this whole reform.
Mm-hmm.
He considers himself an emperor. Is he now considered the first emperor?
He's the
of
first
five?
emperor. He's
Okay.
the first. He's not the first of the 5 good emperors. So when you say 5 emperors, you're thinking of the 5 good emperors.
Correct. Yeah.
There's way more than 5 emperors, but there's 5
Jesus.
that are called the 5 good emperors. And I also don't know every emperor, so sorry about that.
That's okay.
But
we'll focus on the first 5. So he's the first actual
emperor.
Okay.
And that's where I think people get confused because they often think Julius Caesar is the first emperor, but he's not. He's kind of the last character of the Republic.
Okay. And how long does Augustus serve as emperor?
It's from, you could say 31 to I think 17 is the year he dies. So it's somewhere around there.
Okay, so he dies in power.
He dies in power, and then throughout his career, he has this interesting struggle of how do I hand on power that I'm not supposed to have, and what does the successor look like? And he has various successors, and at some point he'll name Agrippa his successor, but Agrippa dies before him. He names Germanicus his successor, which is he's going to die. He has real trouble in actually naming his successor because any of his successors that he names dies, and he basically gets stuck with his wife Livia's son, so basically his stepson Tiberius. We get Tiberius because Augustus tried really hard to have a successor. Everybody keeps dying. And, he has Marcellus, he has all these different guys, and he ends up with Tiberius because there are no other options.
Okay, let's check in on cultural and like civilization advancements. Where are we at as a culture right now?
So you're going to see some of the greatest rising in culture
Okay.
In Rome to this point in time. You're going to see the Aeneid is written during this time.
The what?
The Aeneid, the story of Virgil. It's kind of like their version of the Iliad, kind of the Greek story,
Okay.
or their Odyssey, you could say in a lot of ways.
Okay.
It's written during this time. It's written by Virgil. And in Virgil's will, it's not commissioned by Augustus, but it was also written to like make Augustus happy, if that makes sense in a lot of ways. In Virgil's will, if the work was left unfinished, it was supposed to be destroyed. So Virgil dies with the work unfinished, and Augustus actually makes sure that it gets finished and it doesn't get destroyed because that's a really important work to him. It ties the Romans to the Trojans and gives them this early lore. Also makes his family look good and more legitimate because it ties in some connections to gods. Like Julius Caesar used to claim his connection to the goddess Venus, that they were relative. So it starts to establish kind of some of this early lore. You also get the histories of Titus Livius or Livy that were written during this time. So these are the Roman histories that really are the early version of, what is Roman history. And that's actually where a lot of the history of the kings and things like that come from. So it starts to legitimize what this society is. So you have a lot of these things. You also have the people that Augustus didn't like. The poet Ovid is famous for writing his erotic poetry. Actually, the word lesbian comes from his lover that he named Lesbia from the island of Lesbos, which is written about in the erotic poetry of Ovid. Ovid is actually removed from Rome because Augustus finds him to be publicly indecent, because he's very conservative and he wants to kind of establish this. Augustus is he wants to establish this much more conservative society. Mm-hmm. And one of the problems you start to have in the late Republic is, men and women aren't getting married as much. You're having more children out of wedlock. There's stories about, men caring more about their koi ponds than about actually like taking care of their country and their lands. So he's trying to kind of reestablish things. So he actually creates marriage laws that penalize people for not having children. So he starts to really change Rome dramatically.
Interesting.
There's also some of the great early building projects which take place, like even the Pantheon. Have you been to Italy?
I've been to Italy, never the Pantheon. Yeah.
So the Pantheon, if you read the inscription on the front, it tells you that it was built by Marcus Agrippa, which Agrippa built a lot of great things during the period when Augustus was ruling. That Pantheon was later rebuilt by Hadrian in the 2nd century, but he leaves the original inscription giving credit to Agrippa on the front. So like you start to see this city change culturally, change in the way that it's looking, much more marble, a lot more Greek influence. So it's changing dramatically.
So going back to culture for a little bit, you mentioned how Augustus is and wants Rome to be conservative, but like, is Rome conservative, or are they just like going out partying and banging everything?
They had become a lot less that way, and you're starting to have a lot of children out of wedlock. So you have the problem with, there isn't really succession because illegitimate children can't succeed their parents. So, inheritance becomes a problem. The birth rates are going down of legitimate children. So he's trying to handle these problems. And he does that in a really conservative fashion.
I might have read this, and you got to tell me if I'm right or wrong. It was something along the lines of like, when it comes to like same-sex, like gay and lesbian sex, men, they like considered men and women gender roles like based on your societal status. So like a man that was lesser than would be considered like a feminine role in society, and then a upper man could then like take advantage of that feminine individual.
I don't have an answer for you on that one. I apologize.
Like a lot of gay sex. Was there a lot of gay sex going on at this time?
So during that period of time, I'm not really familiar with that.
The Greeks that were doing that?
So the Greeks had a lot of, a reputation for that. You know, if you've seen the movie Alexander, it wasn't exactly like that with Hephaestion, but there may have been some things happening, right? So Greek culture was very much like that. And in early Roman culture, it was offensive for someone to be called Greek because they were seen a lot more effeminate. Now that's going to change as Rome starts to Hellenize, means pulling in Greek culture. The Greeks would have called themselves Hellenes. Okay. So as Rome starts to Hellenize, those things do become more acceptable in a lot of ways.
So it wasn't like societally acceptable to like fuck whatever you want. And
it wasn't, but those things were definitely still happening, right? Like they were happening, but they wasn't acceptable.
Okay. It wasn't a culture thing to do that.
It's going to get really wild in the mid-second century, or mid-third century. It's going to get really wild.
All right, let's wait for that. Okay, so now we're nearing the birth of Christ, the 0 mark, right? We're in like 13 or whatever it is.
Yeah, he's born somewhere in, around
which I have a lot of questions about that. So I want to wait. I want to pause it when we get to like 33 AD and like what the vibe was like in the area. But okay, let's. So Augustus is still ruling. He dies at around 13 AD. You said?
Sorry, 17, I believe.
17, and then now who takes over after he's gone?
His stepson Tiberius.
And now Tiberius is only there because he's like the only one left. Right?
But at the same time, he had been a successful military commander in his own right. Like he wasn't just like some schlub that got a job.
Got it.
Now he wasn't probably the best for the job, but like at the same time, he wasn't just some schlub. Like he
How
had
old
done
is
a lot.
He when he gets this job?
I think he's in his late 40s or early 50s.
Oh, so he's older.
He is older by that point in time because the Augustus lived a long time. Like, and it was interesting because he had a very sickly constitution. So, he wasn't well. He probably had lost most of his teeth later in life. He wasn't a very healthy guy, which is even interesting about all the statues of him because all the statues of him show him about 30, very young, very vibrant. There's no depictions of him as older, but there's written works that kind of explain, he was dealing with gangrene and like other things later in life. So, but there was always a thought that he was going to die young and he just never seemed to die. Just never seemed to die. Yeah. And even supposedly, his wife even may have poisoned him. We don't 100% know like if he died naturally or if she poisoned him. Okay. And here's the interesting thing about him too, is on his deathbed, I'm going to butcher this quote, but it's basically, he says, if I have played my part well, give me an applause. Basically, you have to wonder, was he acting everything he did for this period of time to create this basically power structure where someone's a king but didn't look like one?
Interesting. And how did he do in this role?
It seems like excellent because everybody wanted to be Augustus at that point in time. You have to think about they're moving from a republic to an empire.
Yeah.
He had to convince people that they didn't have a king and they didn't live in an empire, but while having one functionally, right? Yeah. They still have consuls every year. Early on, he would hold the consulship. Then eventually other people would hold the consulship. But those offices still existed. There were still elections every year, but they had this princeps that never went anywhere until he died.
Right. Okay. So Rome is doing well at this point. Mm-hmm. Tiberius comes in. Does he fuck everything up or what happens?
He's actually doing quite well. Okay. He's doing quite well. The problem is he starts to get paranoid. And he actually later in life will leave Rome and go live on the island of Capri. And in a lot of ways it's referred to like as his like sex palace, if that makes sense. There's a trope about him having like prepubescent boys swimming in his pool that he called little fishes. So he's kind of a sick man later in life. And his Praetorian prefect, which is basically the guy that runs the Praetorian Guard for him, so the guard responsible for protecting the emperor, the main guy, the Praetorian prefect, was responsible for being the second in command to the emperor. So he's basically running the city when Tiberius is going out and living in Capri. His name's Sejanus. And Sejanus gets so powerful that Tiberius actually has him killed.
Wow.
So he gets very paranoid later in life that people are trying to take his power, take him out, whatever it might be. And eventually when he dies, you get Caligula. Caligula, which comes from the Latin caligae, which means little boots or bootykins. And so when we think of Emperor Caligula and how terrible he is, it's funny that he was probably just bootykins.
So he was
he's living his youth in this palace that Tiberius lived in. So you have to imagine what his early years of life were probably like trauma. So you have this guy that is totally traumatized.
He needed a therapist.
And he's the new emperor.
Wow. Okay. But who elected him as the emperor?
He was the next in line.
He was the next. Okay.
He's the next in line. And it's interesting as well because you're not supposed to want power as the emperor. So the Senate would declare you emperor and you're supposed to decline the power several times and then eventually accept it. It was like this whole play acting thing. Yeah, we all know you're going to take it, but you got to say no a couple times.
Okay.
And so you get your next emperor, Caligula.
And what year are we in now?
So that's after... I don't know offhand. These because this is where my knowledge starts to get spotty, and then you pick me up around Marcus Aurelius again.
Yeah, that's what I want to get to. Okay, so now we're around
because it's funny in ancient history, like people will watch a podcast and get upset when you don't know everything about everything, but in history we do have specializations.
Oh, and I think like if we stayed on every individual,
we would be doing this for 3 days.
So we want to focus on the cool stuff,
yeah,
like the emperors. So what year was Caligula in power, Joe?
It's in the 30s or somewhere around there.
That's the end of Tiberius.
Yes.
Tiberius died
in what year?
37.
37 AD.
Yeah.
And now when did
ending his 23-year reign?
It's a good run.
And then the Praetorian Guard is going to kill Caligula, put his uncle Claudius in there.
Okay.
Claudius the Stutterer.
The Stutterer.
And then his wife may or may not kill him, and that's how you get.
So it's a lot of things.
That's how you get Nero, and then Nero's the fun one that.
Like, is Nero the first great emperor?
Great emperor.
Wasn't he?
No, he's not a great guy. No,
oh.
No. The 5 good emperors, like they, we can get into that in a bit. But the first one of those is Nerva, and that's in like 96.
Okay, so when does Nero come in?
So the fire of Rome is in 64. I think he's dead in 69.
Let's not get there yet.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, I can't spell any of these names.
It's okay. just try your best, Joe.
You got it, Joe. I got faith in you, man.
All right, this is what I did for you. Caligula.
Yeah, there you go.
37-41. Claudius 41-54 to 54.
You get Nero 54 to 69.
Wait, are we in AD yet?
What's that?
68.
68, and then you have the year of Galba. 4 emperors. You get Galba, Otho.
Wait, hold on. Wait. We're in AD now?
Yeah, we've been in AD for a while now.
Back up. Okay.
Oh no,
we've been in AD since Augustus died, man.
Listen.
Oh God, wait.
Bring the whiteboard.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in high school class.
We need a whiteboard and those like red yarns.
Wait, when did Augustus take power? What year?
In 27 BC.
BC, right? Okay, that's
and he dies in 17 AD.
Oh, he made it all the way. Okay,
he made it through,
over.
man.
Okay,
he crossed over.
This is what I want to focus on, just because
it's like
I'm
that
intrigued.
movie. Oh God, what's that movie? Don't Come Into the Light. Yeah, he did it.
Oh yeah. So all right, before we get there, I want to focus on Jesus for a little bit and your knowledge of whatever. What was the sentiment towards Christ, especially right before he died? Like obviously he was killed by the Romans. Who was in power this time?
This would be during the reign of Tiberius.
So Tiberius was.
Yeah, he's the emperor at that point in time.
And Pontius Pilate is what?
He's a procurator, which is a Roman governor. So he's the governor of the territory of Judea.
Okay, and Tiberius really doesn't have much concern or say towards the crucifixion of Jesus.
He's too far away. He's not going to know. There's other territories. It's just like the emperor isn't going to care that much.
Okay, and so
like a procurator is there because the emperor doesn't want to deal with it, and he can't deal with it.
So we could let me clear something up for me.
Go ahead.
Rome has always been Rome in Italy. That's where they've been. Like that was their main land.
The city itself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then they just had everything else.
Everything.
Okay.
It goes from being a city to a territory.
Territory.
Yes,
okay. So there wasn't much like in the grand scheme of the grand scheme of things.
It's kind of like LA and Los Angeles County.
Right. yeah. You don't really know what is what. How much impact in the grand scheme of things did like the birth and crucifixion of Christ really have at the time?
So I don't want to minimize it, but at the time, it doesn't matter that much at the time, right? It's
Right.
going to matter more later on.
Right, when the uprise of
Because the Romans wouldn't really have cared that much. Like they're dealing with a lot of uprisings in Judea at that point in time, and even I think it's around the year 70. They're going to get to the point where they're just going to say, "Screw it, we're kicking all you out of here." This is called was it Syria, Palestina, or something like that? They give it a new name and they just kind of kick everybody out.
Yeah, because the Jews are ran by the Romans, and the Romans kind of like give them. The Romans are the ones that.
It's an interesting setup because they're governed by the Romans, but they're allowed to have their own king, which is Herod. But the king answers to the Romans.
Right. So King Herod requests from Pontius whether or not
he
Jesus
still
can be
has to
killed.
get permission from the Romans
Right.
on anything he wants to do.
Yeah.
So it's
and
an
then-
interesting setup, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because then Pontius.
Like he's not autonomous. He
the-
can't do whatever he wants.
Yeah, if he denied the crucifixion of Jesus, Herod would not be able to go and crucify Jesus.
Correct.
Legally. Wow. Okay.
Correct.
All right. So now let's move on to.
I have one side question.
Yeah.
This is a very bad time to ask this.
Oh God.
Were there Italians at this point, or
good question.
Romans are not Italians? I'm so confused on that aspect.
They're Italians.
Okay.
Remember he mentioned how, and I'll help you out. I feel like you're the students the next to me. Remember he mentioned that they were Italian tribes.
they were
almost.
getting
Yeah.
citizenship. Yeah.
No, citizenship is 1800.
Well, yeah, you're not gonna get the.
The
you're not
Italian
gonna
citizenship
get.
is very late.
Well, no, citizenship in the Roman
Well, in the Roman-
Republic,
yeah,
you,
yeah,
you
yeah,
do
yeah.
get citizenship for
Okay.
the Italian, like people living in Italy that are
Yeah.
Italians but aren't Roman by
Yes.
birth. Because remember, Rome starts expanding.
Yes.
We are Roman, you're not, even though you live here and we run you. Eventually, those
Yes.
people are going to start to get citizenship. You're not going to get a united Italy until like the
1860
19th century under Garibaldi.
Which I just realized yesterday, so don't feel dumb. But I didn't realize Italy was younger than the United States. Like that's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, it's
Our
I'm over
timelines-
here
because it's a bunch
thinking-
of city states. Like
crazy.
you want to read about some stuff. Read about the Renaissance, man. You have Imola and you have
we'll
Fort
get
Lee
there.
and you had a lot of these city states, and
you
it's
said Fort Lee?
Fort Lee.
Okay.
No, not Fort Lee.
Not Fort Lee.
Not Fort Lee.
Let's get back on track. Let's get back on
There were
track.
not
Joe.
a bunch
I just
of.
want to say my mind is open because I always looked at the Bible and I'm like, this was a desert, and then I'm like, wait a minute,
There's so much more out there.
there
I
was
know.
all the
It was.
history.
Here's the
going
funny
on
part
the
of it.
same
It was
time,
probably
yeah.
less desert in that period of
Yeah.
time because in the second century they deal with climate change where it becomes a desert.
My God. Read book. You see the picture in your head. I gotta change that whole
See,
thing.
Joe and I needed small classrooms for
this
this
is
sort of
good.
stuff.
This is very
Yeah,
good.
well, it's not
I'm trying my best, and I know some people in the comments will be like, "You missed this and you missed that."
Let him-
Like
let him
my
educate us.
my goal is I'm not the smartest guy in every room I walk into, and I want to make history for regular people because I think most historians
Yeah.
try to make this in a way that it doesn't communicate. And if I get you interested enough to go read a book for yourself or watch a documentary, I won.
Well, guess what? You are the smartest person in this room. So
Yeah.
congratulations.
I guess.
Thank you.
Okay, so now let's fast forward to Nero. What year are we in?
Wait, you don't want to go back to Jesus?
We already did. There's not much like.
Oh, I thought we were gonna continue.
Well, there's not
Well,
there's,
there's not
not
much of
that
an
much
impact.
in that period of time. It's going to become more impact later on. Like you are going to have the apostles to go out and start to expand the message.
Yeah.
All of them are going to be killed for their beliefs. So that is an important point to that.
Yeah.
Paul, the apostle Paul, is actually a Roman citizen from Tarsus. And the reason he's able to travel as much as he did is because he had that golden passport of being a Roman citizen. So that actually was key to the message actually traveling around the empire. So, it's going to start to get out there. There is,
That's why he wasn't crucified.
even by the time that Constantine's going to convert to Christianity, it's still going to be somewhere between 2 and 5% of the empire is Christian. It is a very small percentage. And you're going to see that the massive change in Christianity in the empire is going to be from Constantine taking it and making it legal, right? Because it had been illegal, though it was only persecuted if things weren't going so well. From that legalization in 313 in the Edict of Milan, it's going to become the official religion of the empire by 380 under Theodosius. So things start really speeding up after Constantine legalizes it.
Okay, so we'll get there. But Nero is in year, you said 60 around?
54.
54, and he's going to die in 68. You got me by a year. And then you're finally going to get Vespasian in 69.
Okay.
He takes place after Galba, Otho, and then finally you get Vespasian on top.
What makes Nero so bad? Because he's known as like the worst emperor ever.
Well, there's a lot of interesting things about Nero. Like number one, he's a bit maniacal. He wants to have power, but he also doesn't seem to care about ruling. He wants to be a performer. He's playing the lyre. He's acting in things. He's going as a gladiator. He's racing chariots. He's doing all these different things. It's kind of like if you gave a rich teenager, the key to the parents' wealth, all the things you could imagine would happen, like that's Nero.
Yeah.
And
his parents were rich.
Well, his parents are the emperor. His stepfather is the emperor, right? And he even has a brother that he may or may not have helped get killed.
Who was his stepfather? I'm sorry.
His stepfather, Claudius.
Okay. Got it.
And Agrippina the younger, I believe, is his mother.
Okay.
And she's basically trying to run Rome through him. And he's trying various ways to get her killed. So he tries to put a false bottom in a boat. He tries to create a room where the roof is going to fall in on her. I just imagine this being like a Looney Tunes thing of all the way that he's trying to kill it.
Dodges every
So eventually, Agrippina, he gets her accused of basically going against Rome and gets her declared an enemy of Rome, and she's executed. So now he's gotten rid of her. So now we got Nero on the loose. And that's where you kind of get a lot of the craziness of, he's going around the city dressed as a private person so that he can beat people up for fun. His wife dies, and he takes a boy and has the boy neutered so he can kind of make that boy into his wife. He look at that face.
What?
He's a very, very interesting character. We could do a whole episode on Nero. And then in 64 AD, we have the Great Fire of Rome that happens. And it likely starts somewhere around the Circus Maximus. And I think the thing that's important is to understand is that how Rome is built, right? It's starting to become more marble and more other, but it's still, there's a lot of wood. So when these fires would happen, they would spread very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't have money, you lived in an apartment building, basically like if you think of one of those tenement buildings in New York City, imagine if they were half the height they are now and made of wood.
Got it.
They called them insulae, islands. And they didn't have public restrooms inside. People would go to the bathroom in a copper chamber pot. They would dump it out the window. That's why the curbs are so high, because they would likely be filled with excrement and things that smelled terrible. So these buildings would burn very quickly. So this fire happens, and over a short period, all of these insulae, or these apartment buildings, are burning down. And we get the phrase that Nero fiddled while Rome burned. That actually comes, I think, from the 16th or 17th century, when in the House of Lords in England, they're supposed to be debating about who's going to be the next king, but instead they're debating about a small territory in Africa. And one of the MPs makes a statement, are we going to be like Nero fiddling while Rome burned?
Yeah.
There's a good chance he wasn't actually doing that. What he was doing at the time was he was traveling. He liked to be a musician. So he's in Naples at the time, and he's playing music and hears about the fire, and he actually goes back to the city of Rome.
Okay.
And he actually organizes a really good relief effort. He's using his private lands to house people. He's helping to get food. He's helping to put the fires out. But then Nero fucks up, because then he takes this place that all these apartment buildings have been, and he builds something called the Domus Aureus, or the Golden House. He basically makes himself an enormous palace, gold and opulence and everything else, and people start not to like him that much.
How big we talking?
Do you have a size, Joe? Because it is huge. It's parts of it were knocked down. It's where the Colosseum was built. It is enormous. He had a private lake. He had all of these. Some of the rooms are actually discovered during the Renaissance.
It's like a big square, isn't it?
It's huge.
I've seen.
Parts of it were actually knocked down when Vespasian builds the Colosseum, because he wants to give it back to the people.
Right.
He has a giant nude statue of himself out front.
Nice.
And that statue is actually where the Colosseum gets its name, because it was a colossus. Once he dies and they build the Colosseum, they're going to change the face on the statue.
Right.
But this giant statue is why the Colosseum is called the Colosseum, because of the colossus out front.
Wow.
I mean, there's estimates. It's anywhere between. Apparently, they go for the middle, so 125 acres.
I was going to say 100 acres.
It's
I don't want
big.
to sound dumb.
With 300 rooms, but barely any bedrooms.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What were they doing?
It's pretty big.
Okay, so so gigantic, and that's
It's
where
huge.
You say now this is his mistake. Why?
Makes people hate him,
Okay.
right? Like you did this fire happens. You did the right thing. You basically tried to help people, and then you do the wrong thing and you build a monument to yourself.
Yeah.
Are people going to be very happy with that?
No.
So now he needs a scapegoat. The Christians did it. He blames it on the Christians, and that's where these first massive persecutions of Christians happen.
Wow.
Because he needs a scapegoat.
Okay.
And then Nero's dead by 68, so he doesn't make it that long after the 64 AD fire.
Now, what is his rationale behind blaming Christian? What did the Christians do, quote unquote?
I I don't have anything in particular that
nothing
they
like
did. He just needs a
Propaganda,
scapegoat.
John.
It's just propaganda. He needs a scapegoat.
And they believe
People
it.
blame things on other people all the time. Doesn't mean they actually did anything at all.
Listen, you hear that, people? Okay, so now he's dead.
Yeah.
They topple, I'm assuming, this entire area that he
Well,
claimed
Vespasian is gonna knock a lot of it down.
Who's Vespasian?
Vespasian is 1, 2, 3 emperors after Nero, because you have 2 short-lived ones after him. They don't make it through a year. You have 4 emperors basically in a year span.
Wow.
And by
Holy
69, you're going to get Vespasian, who comes up on top.
Okay.
And his family name is Flavius, so Titus Flavius Vespasianus, or Vespasian. So they call this the Flavian Amphitheater, is basically what it's called.
The Colosseum.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, he's not one of the 5 good emperors.
He's not. We're not there yet.
Oh my God.
That's
okay.
what I'm saying. Like, we could go forever like
Yo,
this,
we're keep
man.
going. Yeah. We're gonna go right to 2026. So yeah, we got time.
You know, Rome didn't fall till like 476 in the West, man. We could go for a long time on this.
We better buckle up, Joe. Okay, so we're in 70 AD.
Yeah.
How long does he reign for?
He reigns for a few years, and then we get his son Titus.
Why did he stop reigning?
He dies.
Oh
Gets
my
old.
God, everyone fucking
He's
dies.
old by the time he gets power. So
Okay.
we get Titus after that. Titus is very short-lived. I think Vesuvius erupts in 79. He doesn't last that long after. So he's about a year to 2 years. And then we get his brother Domitian, who actually rules for, I think, 10 or 15 years after that point in time. Domitian.
What is war like? Like, is Rome constantly getting attacked at this point, like on the borders?
They're constantly attacking others on the borders, if that makes sense. It's, you know, they call it the Pax Romana for a reason. It's peaceful within Rome. It's not peaceful if you're outside of
Oh,
Rome.
not on the outside. So they're just like this fire.
It's growing and
outside
growing
of the
and
border.
growing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're still looking to expand at this point.
They're conquering the known world at this point in time.
Is this a considerably fast time for conquering for them?
The 1st and 2nd century? Absolutely.
Okay, this is like the fastest.
This is the fastest, because by the time you get to Trajan in 117, it's going to be at its furthest extent, and they're going to stop expanding.
Okay, so now let's fast forward to there.
Yeah.
When does Rome realize that they're too big to be ruled by one person?
So we're in 117, where that doesn't happen until 284. So
God,
we're
okay.
that's what I'm saying.
Okay, all right, so let's go. 117, we're at its biggest. How big? I know we touched on it in the beginning of the podcast. How big are we at this point?
Britain, Spain, almost all of known Europe, Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, the Balkans, parts of Greece, North Africa,
Wow.
Egypt, going into Asia. So like, it's huge. It is
Yeah.
massive in this point in time.
Okay, and still not in the good emperor era.
We're not in the good emperor yet. Well, we are. We
We
are.
are.
So Trajan is the second of the 5 good emperors.
Who was the first?
The first was Nerva.
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 What made
He only
Nerva,
rules for about 2 years.
and what made him considered?
So they're called the 5 good emperors purely because the way that they establish power is different, right? Because you have the Julio-Claudians, you have the Flavian dynasty, and you have these other short-lived dynasties. The problem that you get is you usually get a good first one, and then a mixed bag of everybody else that comes after.
Yeah.
Sometimes a good one in there. So the Senate basically convinces Nerva, who's an old man at this point in time, to become the next emperor. And the thing that the 5 good emperors do that's different is they adopt the person closest to them that's qualified to actually have the job to be the next emperor. So it's like basically selecting somebody that's qualified.
Okay.
Now, a lot of them didn't have natural born sons that could take that job. So it becomes not a problem of succession, right? Because if you have a kid and somebody else is picked, well, now you're creating civil war.
So now what is you're mentioning how not a lot of them had children? Do they have wives? Like, what does that dynamic
Well,
look like?
they would have wives. Some of them have daughters. You know, you go to the third one, Hadrian. He was likely very gay. So he had a lover named Antinous that drowns in the Nile River, and he builds statues of Antinous all over the empire. So
Jesus.
it's some of it's daughters, some of it's just not having sons that survive. Others is, you know, you got a boyfriend named Antinous.
So now you mentioned Augustus wanted a more conservative society. Are these typically monogamous relationships? Do they have more than one wife? Like, what does that look like?
Well, it depends how much money you have, right? Like, it's monogamous for political reasons, but they likely had concubines and everything else.
sure.
And a lot of the rich people just,
this point,
even
though.
though Augustus is trying to force the conservatism on them, you would have had those things.
Got it. Okay.
It's because a lot of marriages were for political reasons. You know, these two great families should marry because it was important.
Got it.
So you wouldn't always have like loving marriages, if that makes
Of
sense.
course,
It's
of
for
course.
political reasons.
Okay. So first good emperor, we're in the second good emperor, right? And now what year are we in?
So 117 is Trajan. Hadrian's around the mid 120s. He's gonna start building the wall in Britain, I think, in 128 and finish it by about 132.
Okay.
And that's where Rome actually stops expanding, because he builds the wall in Britain to keep the Picts out, which are one of the Scottish tribes. And that's great name, right? P-I-C-T-S.
Okay.
But basically, they decide to start protecting land instead of taking more of it. So it is a change in how, because this empire, if you think of it as a mechanism, right? The reason that Rome grows is because it's constantly bringing new land.
Yep.
New land brings new slaves and new wealth, right? So, new land brings new slaves and new wealth. When that stops, how do you fund the empire, right?
Yeah.
It is a major problem, right? Because now it's going to start eating itself rather than taking in new things from the outside to grow it. So that is a change, but he's the third. Then you get Antoninus Pius, and then you get Marcus Aurelius. Now, Marcus Aurelius is an interesting one because he has a co-emperor, and this is the first time this kind of happens. You have Lucius Verus, who's his co-emperor, who doesn't live that long. Marcus Aurelius is really going to pretty much have power on his own, especially since he gives some military responsibility to Verus, but Verus really doesn't want to rule, and he likes prostitutes a lot.
Who does, Marcus?
No, not Marcus. Lucius Verus.
I was saying he has a really good rep.
They're dealing with a plague in this point in time too, and we don't quite know what killed Verus, but there's a good chance that the plague that's happening at this point in time kills Verus. So then what Aurelius does is he realizes he probably needs a co-emperor too, because he's just dealt with this. So he names his teenage son Commodus his co-emperor in 180.
And I know I don't.
And
want
he's going to be the first one to not adopt someone else, because now he does have a natural born son.
Correct.
So
Okay,
to not name his natural born son the next emperor would be creating a civil war.
Got it. So in comparison to the movie Gladiator,
Great movie, not historically accurate at all.
Yeah, let's get that out there, because I watched
and the
that.
second one, oh man, I know Julian and I had a full conversation about the second one. It's an okay movie, but they take some leaps.
I don't even care to watch it because I love Gladiator so much. So it's not biblically that's not historically accurate at all.
Oh, and the portrayal they have of Caracalla in that movie, it's just so bad.
I wonder why they chose, they literally went the opposite. Like, Commodus and Marcus's relationship was a good one, correct? And Commodus was a good ruler.
No.
Just no.
No.
Okay.
No, he was not a good ruler.
So let's wait for that part. Okay. So Marcus is the emperor this time. Why is he the most liked emperor, or just the most notorious? Why is he has the most notable reputation, I would say?
I think it's really because he really cares about doing a good job, and we also know a lot of his inner world.
Got it.
Right? Because the meditations that he writes, they weren't intended to ever be published. They were his personal journals. So we really get to see a look into his inner world of he's struggling with, what does mortality mean? What does it mean to take care of people? What does it mean to care for this empire? That's not a look into any other emperor we have. So we can really see this as a guy that thinks deeply about what he's doing, how much he cares. So I think that's why we look at him like that, because we don't have this view of an emperor before Marcus Aurelius. So somebody that actually really cares.
Yeah.
The one of the titles for the emperor is the Pater Patriae, or the father of the country. And he's someone that really wants to function like he's a father of the country and take care of his children.
Understood. Now, was he the birther of Stoicism, or Stoicism existed and he was...
It existed before that. He's raised in the household of Hadrian as a child. His mother was actually very philosophical, and he's raised not in Stoicism. There's another philosophy he's raised in. He's exposed to Stoicism in the household of Hadrian.
Got it. Okay.
So he was trained very much in it from his youth, and and there's a lot of it coming from his mother too.
He was also dealt a pretty bad hand with the plague, correct? There wasn't much he could have done about it.
Well, here's the difficulty of Marcus Aurelius. He doesn't even get to spend a lot of his time at Rome because he's dealing with a plague, but he's also dealing with uprisings on the Danube. So if you want to look towards Hungary and that area.
Okay.
So he's dealing with the Macromanes, one of the tribes. There's another tribe that escapes my mind at the moment, but he's dealing with basically civil wars of barbarian tribes for a lot of his reign, in addition to hundreds of people dying. So it's a very difficult thing to be living with.
Well, I guess that's the importance of his Stoic mindset, was staying even keeled during a time of turmoil and
Yeah.
chaos.
Like it's interesting because he's like kind of like a modern personal development author. Like he's
Yeah.
he's journaling to make himself feel better about all the things he's dealing with. He's
Right.
dealing with death and difficult decisions on a daily basis.
Right. He's talking to himself, but he's actually now talking to generations thereafter.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's to this point, it's one of the most published books in history. It ends up on bestseller lists all the time, still thousands of years after it was written.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting. It was never intended to be published.
Yeah. I wonder where they got that from. That it wasn't intended to be published.
Somebody at some point in time decided we should publish this. I don't know who.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So now that we are still at like the peak of size for the Roman Empire. It's not getting.
Well, they're losing some land because Trajan, as I said, in 117, it's at their height, but he starts to give away some territory because they're hard to keep a hold of. They give away Dacia, which is where their silver mines are. They give away other lands near that. So they are starting to realize we can't really handle a lot of this stuff.
Got it.
So it's smaller. It's never going to be the same size it was in 117. It's just kind of slowly getting smaller.
Is life getting better for the plebeians at this point?
Edward Gibbon, the famous writer of The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, calls this the greatest time in human history to have ever lived. So things are prosperous. Rome is doing well. The Emperor Aurelius is off fighting, but the people actually in the city and in the territory are doing well.
And when you say Aurelius is out there fighting, he's physically fighting this war?
Well, he would have been running them. He wouldn't be out there like, on the
Slashing
front
people with
lines.
swords,
Yeah,
but he's there.
He's not like Alexander the Great, who's literally leading cavalry charges.
I just want to clarify that he's not like leading the charge. Okay, so best time to be a human being ever.
It's what Gibbon says. I wasn't alive then, so I don't know whether to agree with him or disagree with him.
Yeah.
But that's what Gibbon says.
What time span is this? How long does that stretch?
So that's from 96 until about 180.
Okay,
That's it's 120 years. It's a great time, or 100 years is a great time period.
I wonder if he would compare that to like America in the 1900s or whatever.
I don't know. He wrote it in 1776 and didn't make it that far after America was a country. So I don't know.
We need someone modern day comparing the two.
We need somebody that lived a really long time.
Yeah, hundreds and hundreds of years. Because I know you have some. We'll wrap up with the comparisons of like modern day America to the Roman Empire. Okay, let's just keep chugging along. So now we're at the fifth final good emperor, and again, like history is written thereafter, so it's not like it was known. All right, you're the fifth and last. Now let's move on to a different generation of emperors.
But things do really change with Commodus and after Commodus. Cassius Dio says that Rome descended to a city of rust after the basic ruling of Commodus.
And was it? And I guess it's so hard to tell. Is it Commodus's fall or is it a timing thing?
You could say it's a little of both.
Yeah.
You could say it's a little of both, but if you read the descriptions of how he was as a ruler, he's extremely paranoid. He's killing and threatening people around him because he's paranoid. He wants to be a gladiator. He's actually fighting in the arena, but if he's killing animals from a platform because he didn't want to be at the same level with them.
So that part of the gladiator is accurate.
Yeah, he was actually fighting in the arena. But
he doesn't kill.
There's even stories that in 193 when he dies that he might have wanted to actually take Rome and rename it after himself. We don't know because we write these things in postscript. But he was seen as a terrible ruler. He's one of only I think 2 rulers to actually have his body drug after he's dead and thrown in the Tiber.
Oh my God, they hated him.
They hated him.
Did he actually kill his own dad?
I don't think so.
All right. So
it's
that's
a great
not
movie, but not accurate. No.
Damn, they really made it. It's so. I mean, you got to like say these things. You should write like this is not real, just so I don't go around saying that.
It's a good movie though. It is.
It's a great movie.
But there was no guy named Maximus. Sorry. Great movie, but
didn't he depict somebody though? Wasn't there a gladiator that like?
He's probably the combination of several different people. He's kind of like a collage of people to kind of give you that one person.
Right.
But there was no Maximus. He didn't exist.
And Commodus never actually fought other gladiators.
As far as I know,
Yeah.
I know he was killing animals and things like that, but he wasn't very often putting himself in places that he would be in danger.
Yeah.
When he was fighting other people, they would be using wooden swords, so it wasn't dangerous to him. But he'd get a real one because emperor.
That stuff I think is just so cool. How like we are so many years past that, but we still enjoy relatively the same thing. Like
Kim Jong-un played golf and he shot an 18 because he got 18 holes in one. Never been done before. You know what I mean? It's what happens in despotic time periods.
Crazy shit. Okay, so the rise and now the slow burn fall starts with Commodus.
Yeah, and this is kind of where my expertise picks up.
Boy, here we go.
Yeah, the other stuff is kind of stuff that like I know a good deal of it. I can kind of talk my way through it, but this is where my expertise picks up.
So we just started.
Yeah, so my thesis is something I call the Roman pattern. It's the three
Okay.
things that cause a civilization to collapse. One being monetary debasement, the second being you lose control of your borders, and the third being that your politicians basically lose ethics to the point that they only care about right now and kind of getting as much money while the Titanic goes down and not worrying about the future.
No, okay, so this is
And this is kind of where this whole thing kicks in.
got it.
So when we talk about inflation and monetary debasement, like what does that even mean? Because people hear inflation and they're like, oh, I don't know what that means. It basically means that you're increasing the quantity of money so that every dollar or whatever, in this case, the denarius,
Oh, wait a minute.
Here's a nicer silver one here.
So now what is this?
That's a Roman denarius. That is, I didn't look at which one I handed you.
This is a bi-double denarius.
So who does it say on top
Valerian.
of it? Valerian. So that's from the 260s AD. It's rare to have one that silver in 260 because it would have been more like this one, which this is what people would have seen. That's bronze. Because what they were doing is their coins were, in the first century, in the time of Augustus, it's 95% pure.
Okay.
By the time of Aurelian, which I think, did I hand you Aurelian?
Probus, you handed
Here's
me.
Aurelian. Here's Aurelian. By the time of Aurelian, the average coin was 4 to 6% silver.
Okay.
What they would have actually done is it would have been bronze with a bit of a copper wash over top, or bronze with a silver wash over top of it.
Okay.
And that silver would over time flake off in your hand, and you'd get a bronze coin like you have there.
Where do you get these?
So that's from my good friend Dean Kinzer, kinzercoins.com.
This is sick.
Definitely a guy you should interview, by the way. Really smart guy about coins and the history behind them.
Okay.
But yeah, Dean's kind enough to give me stuff to bring with me. And
That's
this is
awesome, dude.
Dean also gave me the Maximinus coin that I gave you as well. Or Maxentius, sorry. And this is Trajan Decius as well. That's in the 250s. So when they have more silver on them, they're all bronze underneath, but these are better preserved, so they have more of the silver content on the edges of them, which means they were probably
Very cool.
used less. So the point is, that coin that was 95% pure, almost 200 years later, is about 4 to 6% pure. What they would do is add other base metals, usually copper, usually other things, to make it more of a bronze mix.
Got it.
And by about 284, when Diocletian, the guy that splits the empire with 4 emperors, takes power, they're at about 10,000% inflation. So their coins were going literally nowhere. So that's one leg of it, is that the money has almost no value.
No
right?
value comparatively.
You'd have to use so many more coins to get something done. And even if people saw one of those bronze coins, they might say, I don't want one of those. Give me something else, or trade me something for it. I want to, it brings up a black market where you start to see people trading things without money.
You know what's so interesting that I'm just thinking about now, and I don't know if this is like an actual factor. So like we talk about inflation, right? Like what was $1 is now $100 in comparison, whatever it is. That back in the day was a physical problem. Like you couldn't hold 10,000 coins.
And that's why today's inflation is so much more insidious, right? Because all you do is you go to you got a shop right down the street here. You go there to buy something. You're like, man, why did bacon get to be like $9? How did that happen? Well, it's because your dollar has less buying value than it did a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And the Federal Reserve likes to call it quantitative easing, QE for short. What that actually means, we printed more of it in a computer somewhere.
Correct.
So now we took the money in your pocket and lowered the value of it. It's a tax that you're always paying, but you don't know that you're paying. So for Romans, it's much more insidious because they would have seen, the color changing from a silver color like this to more of a bronze color like this. Well, to me, that's alarming, right? When you go to the store and something's just more expensive, you're like, I guess it costs more.
Yeah.
It's not that. Your dollar's worth less.
Right, yeah, you're seeing the value decrease, whereas like we're just feeling it.
The weights are changing, the colors are changing, the densities are changing, and even the Maxentius coin I gave you over there, the edges of it, they're cut really funny, which means they cut a lot of coins that year and the die wasn't sharp anymore.
Right.
So it tells you something's wrong with my money and I can see it.
Yeah.
Whereas you go to the store, a lot of people aren't even handling, I don't know about you, I don't even handle paper money anymore.
Right, of course.
Because I just never have cash on me. My kids give me a hard time about it because, certain foods, they only want cash, like go get ice cream or something.
Yeah.
But it's always a credit card. It's always a debit card. It's always Bitcoin, whatever it might be. It's things you're not physically touching and handling. So it is much more insidious because it's more of a mystery to us what's happening with their money. For Romans, it was real.
Very clear.
It's very clear. And I think the thing that's interesting is when it gets that clear, it gets much harder to solve. And various emperors would try to issue new coins and be like, no, this one's good. People didn't believe it.
Wow.
And that's a big problem.
So they lost trust in their own currency.
They lost trust in their currency. And that's something that's almost impossible to get back.
And which resulted in bartering?
It created a giant black market where people would barter for things.
Wow.
And it got to the point where when Diocletian splits the empire between 4 emperors to basically run the thing, he also has his famous reforms. One of those is he issues a new silver currency to try and get people to trust it. They didn't. So what is his next step? He issues price controls. You can actually go in historical records, and there's a list of all the prices that Diocletian set for things. You could only charge so much for legal services. You could only charge so much for grain, to basically try and control the prices. And we've seen through history that doesn't work. You can't tell people how much to charge. Right. They're going to find another way to do it. So it becomes an impossible situation to turn around.
Yeah. Can you, because you breezed by it, how the Roman Empire is now split into 4. He acknowledged that it was getting too big for one person.
It was too big to run, so he creates a system called the Tetrarchy. Tetrarchy simply means rule by 4. Yeah. So you have 2 senior emperors, which are called the Augusti, or the Augustuses, and you have 2 junior emperors, which are called the Caesars, or the Caesars, right? Okay. So you have 4 emperors, but you always had one that was senior of all of them, and that Diocletian makes sure that's himself.
Okay.
So he creates this system to try and run the empire, and he also is experiencing the second leg of this, which is a border issue. When your money is losing value, you're losing the ability to fund border control. You're losing the ability to pay the military to handle those things. And when you're losing the ability to pay the military, you also have to find other ways to defend yourself. So Rome creates what's called a federate system, or the foederati. And what that meant is they would have barbarian tribes under barbarian commanders that fought for Rome. And they would live within Roman territories, live under their own laws, but they would fight for Rome for coin.
It'd be like us hiring illegal immigrants to fight in our military.
Yeah, it'd be like Michigan or Minnesota or one of those areas, right? Oh. It'd be like something like that. Like you could consider that a federate area. Like they're kind of living under U.S. law, but kind of not. They have their own police forces in some areas. So this is an issue that you start to see, and he's trying to handle this border issue. So what does he do? He institutes a new system where you've heard of the titles Count and Duke in medieval sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So he actually creates those titles. Okay. One is called comites and one is called the dux. Okay. And the comites were actually all around the border, defending the border to try and make things a little bit better. Right. And the dukes were the kind of military commanders. Yeah. He also creates a smaller division of the empire because, once again, it's hard to run. So these divisions are called dioceses. It comes from the Greek version of his name, which is Diocles. Okay. So Diocletian's name, he's born Diocles. Diocletian is the Romanized version of his name. And so he makes all these changes to try and control this empire. And it comes at the end of something that we didn't even talk about, but it gets us to this point. It comes at the end of what's called the crisis of the 3rd century. In a 50-year period from 235 to 284, upwards of 26 men claim to be emperor, form an army, attack each other, live a few months, and there's this upheaval of emperor after emperor after emperor dying.
Just claim to be emperor.
Just claim to be emperor. They raise a military force, dress themselves in purple, and might rule for a period of time.
It's like funny to think like that it was kind of that easy to do that.
And there's a pattern that creates this, right? If we go back to Commodus, when he dies in 193, it's what's called the year of 5 emperors. He dies, there's 2 smaller claimants, then there's another guy named Septimius Severus, and he comes in from North Africa. And with his legions, there's some funny things going on in Rome. The first new emperor you have is a guy named Pertinax. Yeah. The Senate selects him, claims him to be new emperor. He's then killed by the Praetorian Guard. The Praetorian Guard then auctions the empire off for 20,000 denarii per man to a man with one of the best names in Roman history, Didius Julianus.
Great.
Didius Julianus is going to be killed by Septimius Severus and his legions. Okay. And the thing that Severus does is something that every one of these emperors in this 3rd century crisis and onward are going to do. He doubles the size of the legions and he doubles their pay. So now that pattern, if you're going to double the pay, if you're going to raise the pay every time and you don't have enough money, where are you going to get it from? You're going to clip the coins. Clip pieces off, add other metals to handle the weight. And that's how you get inflation in real time. You clip, continue to clip.
Crazy to think about.
And over a 200-year period, that coin has lost almost all of its value.
I guess it's like a really hard, like when you take a step back about and look at like inflation or deflation. Yeah. It all comes down to like value of things, right? So like a coin if one coin,
it's all perceived.
It's all perceived. Like that's my point. And perceive value requires convincing of that perceived value. So if I say to you like that can right there is worth 5 coins, you ask me why, and you're like, well, it's more valuable than the thing that's worth 4 coins, and you're like, okay, but I like that thing more, and you're like, but no, I am telling you this is
I'll
actually
give you 5 coins for it.
Right? Yeah, right, right. So like now we have, I look at this society, and I'm like you said, eggs are really, really expensive.
I have chickens. I wouldn't know how expensive eggs are.
Which is great, right? Like, yeah, and I don't think they're as. It depends. Anyway, it's like who's determining that, and I know it now has to do with more of like trade and foreign trade and where we're getting it and how much they're charging us.
Well, that's the marketplace too, like, right? Like, I'm willing to pay that much for it. It becomes a standardized price. People agree with it, but then as costs raise, or money loses value, then the cost raises.
Yeah.
At some point in time, somebody had to say, I'm charging this much for this thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then at that same time, people had to accept that price and say, yes, I will accept that. Like we have a standardized pricing structure, and why do we follow that? Like why do we not barter?
That's
and
a whole nother question, because there's
like
economic forces and everything else that go into it,
It's just like, but you wouldn't even consider negotiating at a supermarket. Like that's the price. So you're not gonna be like, I'll give you $8.
You ever been to China?
But that's my point.
You can negotiate for everything in China.
My point.
And then they go, America, good price, best price. No, that's not your best price. I'll give you.
That's my point. And that's another developed country. Like you have America where like you're not paying less than what is asked for. Like that is the amount, and that's it. You go to India, you go to China, you're bartering everything. It's just a crazy thought process that we just follow the directions, follow the rules.
I think we were in China for like 2 weeks. I think I spent like $100
because you're like, nah, I'm not paying that.
Ate like a king, drank whatever I wanted. Not that I think China's great. It was kind of a scary place. There are guns everywhere. Not that they aren't here too, but
different. Yeah. Anyway, I just think the whole theory, or not theory, like overall scope of inflation is just a trippy thought.
It's a trippy thought, but I think when you realize where coin standardization came from, it came from the weight of it.
Yeah.
This amount of silver will buy this. Once you start to understand that it's not this amount of silver anymore, well, it doesn't buy that anymore, right? Now I still need that weight of silver. Well, I need 5 of those coins to now equal that weight of 1 coin of silver.
Right.
Right. So
that makes sense. Like gold standard makes sense. Now that we're not on the gold standard, where do we even come up with this stuff?
And that's the problem, because if you look at where money's based, it's based on the true faith and credit of the U.S. government, which, right now is a petrodollar.
Yeah.
As long as that holds value, we're in good shape. But if you look at the number of transactions in oil that now happen in U.S. dollars, it's going down every single year.
Yeah.
And going into other currencies.
Yeah, true. We'll get there. we will first get that. Okay, so now you explain very simply, which is actually really good to understand, like literally this coin is becoming less valuable because it has less silver in it.
Well, I think it makes it more real to people when it's like you look at it's just literally the weight of a coin is changing.
Yeah.
And it's changing just because different metals weigh different things, right? So you're telling me this coin is the same. It's the same size. It kind of looks the same, but it weighs less. Well, something's wrong with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just why, I mean, I guess like then the question is like, why did we even need to start for them not printing, creating more coins? Like why was it not
the accepted system of exchange, right? Like you have to create a new system of exchange then. That's how they did things.
Yeah.
And coins in Rome originally came from military pay. Like you had to pay the soldiers in something. It was a lot more of a barter economy, early republic, and it changes as coins get standardized.
You may not know this, but where was silver found? Like could you find your own silver at this point?
Well, in different areas. I mentioned Dacia, which was one of the key areas that Rome actually lost after Trajan. Dacia was one of the biggest silver mines in all of Europe at that point in time. But the silver mines start to go dry because they're mining a lot of it out, so they can't get more silver. They'd conquer places, take their silver. So it's mining, it's conquest, it's whatever we have to begin with.
You're dealing with like a finite amount of silver, but an infinite amount of coins.
Right. And there's gold in circulation too, right? But the problem is people are hoarding gold. So gold wasn't really in circulation, right? It had been in circulation, but a lot of gold coins are being hoarded. So you're not seeing them in the marketplace.
Got it. And again, like somebody placed a value on gold versus silver, and one is worth more than the other for whatever
it's
fucking reason.
Perceived to be so little value, and you have something like diamonds.
Right.
That whole thing is a racket, and they created artificial shortages there. So it's interesting. It is
crazy. Okay, so that was one of the 3 what you consider pillars of downfalls.
Yeah, it really is, because when you don't have money, it creates a lot of other problems, right? You can't pay for things, and we mentioned the grain dole. That becomes a bigger and bigger part of Roman society after the Gracchi brothers introduce it in 133.
Okay.
Initially, it's a reduced amount. eventually becomes free. So now you're giving free grain to people that are in need of it.
Yeah.
Well, that's a cost raising. And one of the coins I gave you was Trajan Decius, and Trajan Decius is emperor around 250. And one of the things he's dealing with is climate change. From around 200 BC to 200 AD, it's something called the Roman climate optimum, meaning that they had this perfect weather that also helped Rome to rise in the way that it did. You could grow grain and grapes and things in places that you couldn't do that modernly. So their ability to grow grain was dramatically higher. What you start to have around 250 is the main area that was feeding Rome was Egypt. We talked about Egypt being a desert. It was much less so in that time period. The Nile River would flood every year, and the Nile Delta would get really rich, and you could grow a lot of grain in it.
Okay.
What started happening around 250 is it doesn't overflow one year. And then it goes 2 years without overflowing, and then it just stops, which means now we've lost the ability to get this important Egyptian grain, which is now feeding people. So grain prices start to go up because there just isn't as much of it available, and you need more of it. So you're seeing the money get absolutely crushed.
What were we trading in exchange for crops? Just paying for it? Coin. Okay. So we didn't have anything to like really barter or exchange.
No, it was one of the important things about Rome is they traded a lot of things in coins.
Got it. Okay.
It gave them value.
Cool. Got it. So Nile River clears up, dries up.
It doesn't dry up, but what happens is it would flood, and that flooding would make it better to grow.
Right.
So now it's no longer going over its banks every year.
Right.
And that's causing it so we don't have the abundance of grain we would have had, which means the prices are going to go up.
Of course. So now we have to pay more.
We have to pay more for grain.
We
have to pay more for our soldiers. We have all these Federate troops we have to pay, and we have to pay them well because they're not Roman. And if we don't pay them well, then they might decide, well, things aren't going so well. And you have barbarian commanders that are a Federate commander one day, and they're going to go back to their tribe and attack Rome. And that's what starts to happen in kind of the late 5th century. You look at Alaric, who's the guy that sacks Rome in 410. He had fought for Rome at one point in time. And then once he doesn't get the positions he wants, he goes back with his Visigothic army and decides he's going to sack Rome.
Do you see a trend in when a country or nation, like a position of land, the only value they have to offer is coin? They seem to be at a disadvantage. Like, so for example, if during this time period they were trading something in exchange for this crop and grain, the shortage of coin wouldn't be as much of an issue.
Right.
Right. So like that was also a reason for the downfall.
Right. And I think the thing
all they had was coins.
Well, the thing you have to look at is, as I mentioned, the military starts changing dramatically. And I guess let's go back to a specific date of when that really starts to happen. We mentioned it becomes more of a professional military, around 100 BC when we get the Marian reforms. But then in 212 AD, the Emperor Caracalla is going to issue an edict that's going to take about 30 million people and make them citizens overnight.
Whoa. One
of the reasons that he would do that is because that it granted him the ability for a new level of taxes on those people as citizens.
Got it.
So he's trying to bring in new money. Now, one of the key things that the military did is it was a road to citizenship for people that weren't. If you served in the military for 25 years, it will later become 30 years, et cetera, and you can manage to not die, you would get citizenship.
Wow.
Now that meant that your family could have citizenship and all your descendants would have citizenship.
Okay.
So the military was a real important path to that. After citizenship becomes free, there's less incentive to now join the military.
Who made it free?
Caracalla.
Bad decision.
Caracalla. He gives citizenship to 30 million people overnight.
So he made citizenship easier, and that was a bad thing.
It was a bad thing. And obviously there's we could get into the nitty gritty of it. There's various levels of citizenship. There's citizenship with the vote, without the vote, whatever it might be. But ostensibly, the army was a pathway to citizenship. And that changed after people said, well, there's not as much of an incentive to join the army if now all the people made within Roman territory that aren't slaves are now citizens.
It seems like, and I'm not trying to draw comparisons to like America yet, but it seems like providing substantial value to this nation, aka serving, should be a requirement to achieve citizenship. Why should I be able to be a citizen of a country just by signing a couple papers and saying that I want to be a citizen? Like, what is that really? Why do I deserve
It's
that?
a difficult question, right? Because I think that here's the problem that you get, and I think you see this in various places, is you can look at immigrants that came to America, whether they're Irish or Italian, or whatever they might be, like they came to America and they became part of this country.
Right.
They retained a lot of their traditions, but they became American. And I don't think that's a problem. I think the problem is when you get people that they don't want to just retain their traditions, they want to live in their country in America.
Exactly.
Right. And that starts to become a problem. And
Send money back to where they are.
Right. And I think when you look at your money is losing value, and the only reason that people are loyal to the country or territory they're living in is for the money. Mm-hmm. Once the money lacks value, well, what do you have? Right. You don't actually have anything. And that's when a civilization collapses, is when those 2 points really go over each other. And the thing that drives it deeper is the third leg of this, which is where politicians kind of lose their sight for the future, which is what the third century crisis was, and look at what's just good for me right now, and hopefully I can get mine before I die.
I guess they're almost like forced to, though. Like, you know what I mean? When you're in a true time of crisis, it's hard for you to look into the future because you have to deal with it now.
Yes and no, though, right? Because you can look at it for your purposes, right? If you're doing it just to enrich yourself, like the incredible stock investors we have in our government, they are like savants. Right. They're literally idiot savants in their ability to invest in stocks. Yeah. That would be a great example of that. And I think you see this with people in Rome, whether they would want to advance their brother-in-law or advance their friend, or it wasn't when it starts to be not based on merit anymore, right? Because one of the things toward the end of the third century crisis, I mentioned you have these emperors dying very frequently. In 260, you have an emperor named Valerian. I think actually
one of those coins was Valerian.
So the interesting thing about Valerian is he's the first Roman emperor to be captured alive. And he's captured by the Sassanid king Shapur I. And he's used as Shapur's footstool to get on his horse the rest of his life. Now, it's an important moment because if Rome was strong, what would they do? They'd send military and go get him back.
Right.
Gallienus, who's his son and the emperor that takes over, is unable to muster enough military force to even attempt to go get his father back.
And I'm sorry, who took his father?
Shapur I, the Sassanid Persian king.
And they just took him. And
just took him.
And America, America.
It was in battle, obviously. They didn't just sneak in and take the guy.
Rome was like, hey, sorry, I can't help you.
Yeah, they did not even seek to go get him back. So that's an important denoting moment because it shows where Rome is at. They don't lack the power or the will or the ability to do that.
Wow.
So what ends up happening after that point is in the West, a Roman governor breaks off part of the empire and forms the Gallic Empire for himself. And then you have a client king that had been serving Rome, breaks off in the east and forms the Palmyrene Empire. So now you have kind of the hollowed out center of Rome, and you have these two separate empires sitting there, right? The peripheries have kind of pulled themselves off for the center that's not helping themselves anymore.
Right.
In the 270s, so this is in 260 where all this happens. Then you have, so it was Posthumus in the west, Odenathus in the east, and they kind of form their own things. In the 270s, you have an emperor named Aurelian, one of my favorite emperors in Roman history, and I hope they make a movie about this guy's life because he's a total badass. They call him the Restitutor Orbis, or the restorer of the world. In a 4-year period, he reconquers the west, he reconquers the east, puts it all back together, issues better money, fixes everything, and he's assassinated by his secretary.
Come on, why?
And that ends up being the end of Aurelian, and then you have a few more bad emperors until you get Diocletian in 280.
Why did it happen?
Because his there was basically rumors of a plot to assassinate Aurelian, which is blamed on the secretary. And the secretary kind of thought, well, if he's hearing these rumors, he's probably going to kill me, so I guess I should kill him. So the rumors create the plot that was actually created in rumor. But my point being, great men can still arise, but in a system that's broken,
it's hard.
Competence is looked down upon. And I think that's what you're looking at when you're looking at this third leg, right? You still get competent men, you still get great men, but how does the system look at great men? Do they look at them as, something that's important or something that's powerful, or do they look at them as something that is a danger to continuing the system in the way they're continuing it? That's when you're in real trouble.
Got it. Do you know what he did specifically you said he improved the coin supply or the currency? How did he improve it?
He issued a better silver coin. I don't know where he got the silver from, but he issued it wasn't It definitely was not anywhere near the coin of Augustus, but it was way better than what was being issued at the
That's
time.
what trips me up about like this again, their base of value was this finite amount of silver. So like if you find more silver, great. If you don't, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
You're not like, you can't make it. You can't convince everybody that, hey, silver was dead and now it's this thing that's valuable because we have a tremendous amount of it.
Yeah. And you even get to the point where the successor that the Senate picks to actually replace Aurelian is an elderly gentleman named Tacitus, who's actually the relative of the Roman historian Tacitus that had lived long before him. He doesn't want the job. He does not want to be emperor at this point in time, because you get to the point where this role isn't even able to be inhabited, right? You can't actually...
I wouldn't want this job.
Like the guy before him did everything perfect. He brought back the East, brought back the West, started to fix the money, and he's dead. So that's the point you get to. So when you get to Diocletian becoming emperor and actually fixing the thing, it's kind of an interesting concept. But I guess here's the problem with it. In fixing it, Diocletian creates a much more despotic system.
What does that mean?
Despotic meaning hard, direct rule, more like obvious kingship.
Okay, like a tyrant.
More like a tyrant.
Okay.
It's when historians explain Rome, they call the time of Augustus until the time of Diocletian the Principate. Because it's run by a princeps, it's better run. After Diocletian, it's called the Dominate, because it's run by a dominus or a lord, someone really running, more opulent. He's one of the first to wear a crown or a diadem, as they call it. So it is a very different Rome than what you see before it. And the West is fixed for a bit, but you don't have a ton of time after that. Now, the thing that doesn't often get talked about is we've talked a little bit about Constantine throughout our conversation. He's the first emperor to become a Christian. But the other thing that he does, which is never really talked about, is he fixes the currency. In 314, in a city named Trier in Germany, he mints less than 100 gold coins. And until the time he dies in the mid-330s, he's going to mint more gold coins every single year. Okay. So by the time he dies, they're on a gold standard of a coin called the solidus. And that coin's going to go till about the year 1000 without inflation. Wow. So one of the key reasons that the East survives when the West falls, number one, Constantinople, hard as heck to attack. But number two, it had a strong currency.
Now, in theory, and I know it's not practical, would zero inflation be a good thing?
I'm not an economist. That's kind of over my pay grade.
Yeah. Well, I asked that question. I'm not an economist either. I'm like just like thinking through the theory of that. Like, why wouldn't that be good? I guess like it would be impossible. I'll have to ask.
It would be impossible to achieve. I would be interested to hear a non-Keynesian economics person's opinion on that.
I wish I could call my economist friend and see it. I'll do it after the podcast. But yeah,
but I guess the point is like
it's like an inevitability, but how do you titrate it back and forth so it's not incredibly high or incredibly low?
Yeah, and I don't know if the gold standard is a solution for us, but my point is, if you tie your money to something and start to fix the system, like something can be fixed.
Why did we get off the gold standard? Do you know?
It started with Richard Nixon in 1970, I believe. Yeah. And they tie it, is it Bretton Woods, or what's the agreement where they tie it to oil? But that's basically what ends up happening. Not an area of my expertise.
Because oil's considered the most valuable thing, I guess, on the planet.
At that point in time, yeah.
Which is probably still is. Okay. I wonder if we ever, whatever. Anyway, back to what we were talking about. Okay, so now we're in the period of, this is very interesting that he started to mint more gold and provided more value without inflation until the year 1000.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that
it's not 1000 on the dot, but it's in the 1000. So there's not a dynasty that comes up that starts debasing again because hey, it worked the first time, right?
Anything else that's important up until?
I would say that, well, in 476, you get the West falls, because you have Theodosius divides the kingdom between his sons, Arcadius in the east and Honorius in the west. Arcadius is a little bit of a better ruler than Honorius, and you get Rome is sacked in 410.
What is that? Can you
Sack
explain?
means basically they attack it for 3 days, take all the goodies, and leave.
Who?
The barbarians. And this time it's the Visigoths.
And where are they from?
By Alaric.
Where's that from?
So Visigoths means, is it West Goths, and Ostrogoths means East Goths. So the Goths are a group, but they have part of them that comes from the East and part of them comes from the West. But they're typically being pushed from the Balkans into Rome. They're being pushed there by the Huns. The Huns kind of pop up out of nowhere. Rome starts to have a problem with them. There is some military connection between Rome and the Huns. And the Huns are pushing these barbarian tribes further and further and further west. And then Attila the Hun dies, his whole kingdom falls apart, but now these barbarians have moved west, and now they're a problem for Rome because they had started to enter Roman territory and ask for help. So this is now Rome is not just dealing with an inflation crisis and a pseudo border crisis. Now they're dealing with
a real border crisis.
A real border crisis. Because now there's people settled not just on their borders, but within their borders because Rome let us stay there. So you start to see this real collapse in the West because now there's not a ton they can do about it. And Rome had made promises to them of, hey, you can live in Roman land, but they start to break those promises.
Okay, so I'm sorry, this is post sacking of Rome.
Yeah, this is well post the sack of Rome.
So they sack the land, they take everything. Does it go back?
I'm sorry, this is before the sack of Rome. This is 376 when this happens. Sack of Rome's in 410.
This then leads to the sack of Rome.
This leads to the sack of Rome.
So what happens post sack?
So post sack, what you're going to he's dying over there. Your sack okay?
He's just loving the word.
Is your sack okay?
This is going to be the word of the week now.
I knew I got it. I'm going to start sacking people and land. Okay, so Rome is sacked.
Yeah.
What is the result? Like, is it a dead? Because I'm picturing.
Well, I guess let's just go a little bit earlier, just to kind of draw
yeah.
a little imagery here. So in 376, you have this humanitarian crisis that happens. So Romans let about 200,000 barbarians come across the border.
Okay.
Rome makes promises to them of land, food, and all these other things. They don't keep those promises. It gets to the point where the Roman governors living in the land are basically trading food to the barbarians for their children to bring into slavery. And about 2 years later, you have a battle called Adrianople, where the Emperor Valens is actually going to fall in battle to the barbarians. And that's kind of a key moment in kind of the Western collapse.
Why are they promising anything to the barbarians?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Like, it wasn't like an exchange of things?
It might have seemed opportunistic to them at the time, right? Like, maybe this group has some value to us or they could serve for us, whatever it might be.
Okay.
But they, once again, because of not just the money problems, but the corruption problem. This isn't even something caused directly by the emperor. It's caused by governors and military men on the borders changing the decision, even though the emperor's made a different decision.
Okay.
So 378, this battle called Adrianople, the Emperor Valens actually falls in battle to the Goths. And it's a dramatic change now to what's happening. And then where you go from there, Rome's sacked in 410. And there isn't even an emperor in the city. The emperor has moved north to a city called Ravenna because they can't protect Rome anymore.
Whoa.
Ravenna is a place where they're living because it's surrounded by swamps, and it's easier to protect yourself because it's very hard to take a military force through a swamp.
So the emperor fled and is now in this swamp area.
They've developed a new court in the city of Ravenna, and that is now, you have the city of Rome, which kind of is the capital. The Senate is there, but the emperor isn't there anymore. He's in Ravenna.
Where is modern day Ravenna? Do you know?
Ravenna is towards the north. I'd have to see it on a map. I don't remember offhand. Okay. But you get closer to Milan, but not quite to Milan.
Gotcha.
It's actually where the poet Dante, when he gets kicked out of Florence, ends up spending the rest of his life in Ravenna.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Anyway.
So Rome, again, sacked. What does it look like? Is this like a wasteland now?
It's not a wasteland. I think that's the important thing to understand. The population's lower, but it's not a wasteland.
Yeah.
And because what happens as well is when Rome is sacked, they don't attack churches and things like that. They leave those alone for the most part. Huh. But they are taking people into slavery. They are taking their goods. It's an interesting. It's a 3-day period where that happens.
Yeah. And what is the result of that? Like, who is now running the show in Rome?
Well, nobody's running the show in Rome. Rome in the West is being run from Ravenna. It's kind of the city that was, the eternal city of Rome is no longer functioning as its capital.
Okay. And you said the Huns sacked?
No, that was the Visigoths.
Okay. The Visigoths. Mm-hmm. Did they try to claim power and run Rome after this?
No, they demand tribute, which means that Rome would pay them money every single year to just leave them alone, not attack them
again. And then go back to where they were from. Wow. And then
you're kind of your last 100 years, what you end up having, not even last 75 years, you have basically barbarian warlords running Roman emperors who are kind of just emperors in name. And you get your final Roman emperor in the West, Romulus Augustulus, who's a teenager. And in 476, the barbarian king at that point in time, Odoacer, retires him, sends the imperial regalia back to Constantinople, says there are no emperors anymore.
Right.
And he retires this emperor on a pension. And, he lives at least another 25 years that we can tell. After that point in time, there's no mention of his name anymore.
Wow.
So it just transitions to something else. The fall of Rome isn't a fall like we're told, right? It's not fire and brimstone. It's not. It's a long downslide until you finally get someone saying, "Okay, it's over."
So
it's more of a administrative mark than an actual collapse.
A very boring ending.
Yes.
So the quote unquote end is around which year? 470, you said?
476 is the like traditional fall of the West.
When
the East itself falls in 1453, so almost 1,000 years later.
Okay. And so now what happens next? Like
what happens next is Odoacer rules for a few years. Then you're going to have a guy named Theodoric that was a barbarian but had been living at the court of the Eastern Roman Emperor.
Okay.
Start to form his own kingdom. He'll invite Theodoric to dinner, kill him at dinner in front of everyone, and he'll run a barbarian Roman kingdom for about 30 years, which actually he'll continue to use Latin. He'll continue to use a lot of the Roman bureaucracy. He'll continue to use a lot of the Roman offices. So for 30 years, it operates as a Roman kingdom, which is quite interesting because it had been dysfunctional for almost 100 years before that.
Yeah.
And for 30 years, he runs almost a functional
Roman
almost kingdom.
Better off under his.
If you look at him versus the last emperors, Rome under Theodoric is better than Rome under the last emperors.
What was his religion at this point? Do they have one?
He would have been an Arian Christian at this point in time.
Oh,
so
okay.
And that's one of the difference between the like Romans and a lot of the barbarians. We kind of didn't talk about this, but the Council of Nicaea that happens in 325, the actual thing that it decides is what do Christians believe?
Right.
Because there's two different versions of Christianity that we have at this point in time. There's likely several, but there's two that were important. One being Orthodox Christianity, the other being Arian Christianity. And Arian Christianity debated on what is the true nature of Christ. Is he true God, true man? Is there a Trinity? What is it? And the idea of the Council of Nicaea was just to decide what does Orthodox Christianity believe? And that's where Arianism is branded a heresy. Now, a lot of the Romans were Orthodox Christians. A lot of the barbarians had become Arian Christians. So that's what their religion would have looked like. It would have looked like Christianity, but not quite the Orthodox version, if that makes sense.
I wonder what,
what you do start to see later on is you'll start to see barbarian kings converting to Orthodox Christianity, likely to get acceptance of the Pope because the Pope had become more of a political figure as the West collapsed.
Oh, we didn't even get to the okay. Oh, Jesus. So now, okay. So they're Arian Christian and Orthodox Christian. I'd be very curious to know what the minute differences are between the two.
So I'm not an 100% expert on this, but it has to do with the true nature of Christ.
All right. Was he a man? Was he a God?
I believe the idea was, and someone out there in the comments will probably correct me on this. It's you want to give us the difference between Arian and Christian?
Joseph, please look up the difference.
It's something to do with the difference between the nature of Christ. And I don't remember the exact specifics of what Arians believe.
Difference between Arian.
It's a little out of
I thought Arian was like racist, like white.
No, so it's a different use of the word. There was a preacher from Egypt, and his name was Arius, and that's where you get the name Arian.
Okay.
Jesus was created by God, but not equal.
Who said this?
The Arians.
They said that Jesus was
Well,
created
you're
by
a Christian. I figured you know that was not.
This comes from
sorry, I didn't
Arius.
mean it like that. I didn't mean it like that.
These were Christians.
So
So the Arians believe that Jesus was created by God, but he was not God himself.
yeah, he was not equal to him.
Okay, and now
He was not God. He's not.
So that was
And that
that
comes
was the
from
major
the preacher
difference.
Arius, which was from I think around Alexandria, so
And then,
in Egypt.
Yeah, the Orthodox believe that.
So this
he
had
was
become
man
like
of
a
God.
real problem in the church, and a lot of barbarians were Arian Christians, whereas a lot of Romans were Orthodox Christians.
Where do the Catholics come in?
Well, they're all Catholics at this point in time. That doesn't happen until 1054, where the split between I think 1054 is where the Great Schism is, and it's the split between Orthodox Christianity and Catholic Christianity. The word Catholic just means universal. It just means the universal church.
Okay, so they're all under.
They're all Catholic at this point because nobody's really Orthodox yet.
And how does the rise of the Pope happen?
So the Pope is really just the Bishop of Rome.
Yeah.
And he starts to get power because he gets political power in a lot of ways, and it's not because he asked for it. It's because you get after the sack of Rome, there's nobody left, and the Pope's like, I guess I can answer the door. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, okay.
And so it kind of, I think people have this conspiracy theory that the Catholic Church runs the whole world, and really what happened is.
So the Catholic Church runs the whole world.
No, it does not. No, what really happened is
The secret book.
There's no secret book.
Okay.
As kind of the West collapsed, there are functions that still had to happen, right? Like people still had to run courts. taxes still had to be collected. People still had to be fed.
Right. This
someone
is
still had to. Someone still had to run the city.
This isn't a
and the
barren
church
wasteland.
was the only institution still
Got it.
standing. So just somebody had to do the job.
And they
you know
were
what I
doing
mean?
it. Got it. Okay. Understood. So
And that's
work.
kind of a lot of the power just happens by happenstance because they were the last one standing.
That is so
There is
interesting.
no imperial structure anymore. The church is just left, and someone's got to do something. You know.
So now this is a bleak period of time, I guess you can consider it, up until what, like the thousands? Like when is?
Well, you get Charlemagne in 800, which is the Frankish king. That's the first Holy Roman Emperor, right? There hadn't been a Roman emperor in the West since Romulus Augustulus, and you get the kingdom of Theodoric that we talked about. Then you get the Lombards that have it for a while. Then you have the various barbarian tribes that come in, the Franks. The Visigoths are kind of gone by this point, and so you kind of. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot going on here, but by the time you get to 800, things have kind of solidified where the Franks are kind of the biggest power. And that's when in 800 on Christmas Day, the Pope crowns Charlemagne the first Holy Roman Emperor. So it's kind of like this political structure is still here. It's the Holy Roman Emperor that's a whole other podcast. It's a really interesting role because he's kind of a king above other kings, but they're all still kings and equal. It's a really weird role, but that's kind of where the title ends up going. And it's because the power structure kind of is gone and now kind of rests in the church because it was behind. You know, it's the last thing left standing.
Okay. So now this is year 800. What is the, I guess, what really changes up until like the Renaissance period? Is it just like still kind of status quo for...
For the most part, kingdoms are kind of moving gradually. The thing that happens in the Renaissance is a lot of stuff that had been forgotten is lost. Latin was still being used in law and still being used in religion, but it wasn't used as much in everyday life. So people weren't able to read things. There's more discoveries of art, like certain parts of Nero's Golden House are discovered during the Renaissance, and they can start to see some of the artwork. So it is kind of a rebirth in a lot of that knowledge, but at the same time, the Dark Ages aren't as dark as people want you to believe they are. It's just that things had changed a lot, if that makes sense. Because what ended up happening is you have Rome, that's a big thing. Yeah. Rome kind of dismantles into smaller kingdoms. Those smaller kingdoms fight for a long time. Right. Then eventually you get a bigger force again. And just things have become more local and more and smaller. Yeah. But then they start to centralize again. That's just kind of how they work.
It's like the nature of evolution of okay. And when is the Renaissance period? What year are the?
It's like the 1400s.
Okay. And I guess from there on out, we start having like actual countries like established, right?
Well, you have countries long before that, right? Like you have countries in the 1100s. You start to have a lot of that. Yeah.
Oh, like European countries were forming.
European countries are forming because it had been a lot of like large territories, but you start to see that break down to countries. Yeah. That kind of gets, now we're on the other side out of my expertise. So I'm sure there's somebody that could fill that in, but you do start to see countries forming after that.
And it is also crazy that we still have like the Pope and the Vatican that are still doing their thing over there.
It's a position that's existed for a long time. That goes all the way back to Constantine and kind of how Christianity becomes legal. It becomes the official religion of the empire under Theodosius in 380. And, it's existed long since.
Sure. Let's pull some correlation between...
And obviously, there's a lot more to all that, but the thing is, I don't want to make this take 7 hours.
No, listen, you gave what I consider the best high level explanation of the rise and the fall of the Roman Empire.
Well, because here's the thing: is I don't want somebody out there with their head spinning, being like, "What the hell did he just say?" My channel is the Roman pattern, and we actually take these hundreds of years and we'll do them in 20-minute snippets.
Yeah. So if you want to dive into deeper parts of this, go to his channel. But for right now, my head is fucking spinning. So that was really good, and I appreciate that like kind of timeline and walking us through that. I think it answers a lot of questions. Obviously, leave a comment below if you guys have any. But let's get into now the correlation between the Roman Empire, similarities between that and maybe what we see in modern day America.
Well, I think when we look at that, you look at kind of the value of our dollar, right? Like how much is the cost of things raised? And I think the thing I hate the most about the statistics we're given every year is, have you ever seen how inflation's tracked and how it's reported?
Ever seen how it is? Or?
Yeah, like when they give us the government stats every year, you ever seen how they do it? It's reported year over year. Yeah. Okay, we're up 4% over last year, 5% the year before. Well, what if we take that out to 200 years? What does that look like? And I think that's the problem, right? Is we're not given those statistics long term. We're giving them year over year. Yeah. But there's also certain things that aren't included in the inflation number. There's building materials and various other items that aren't included in inflation. The cost of those things are going up dramatically.
Yeah.
So we're given those numbers, we're not given the real picture. And I would love to know, kind of what that is. When I ran some basic numbers, if you look at since 1800 until now, we're somewhere around 3,000 to 3,500% inflation. So that inflationary number is going fast. The national debt is speeding up. That is a real problem, right? We can't handle a lot of the things that we're responsible for as a country. The other part, if you look at as well, we're not able to handle our borders. Like, that is a real problem. How many millions of people are here in America that we don't know, undocumented, that we're not far from New York City. Have you walked past the Roosevelt Hotel and seen the dumpster out front with all the strollers and things in it, all the free things given to the illegal immigrants that come here, that some of that they want, some of they don't want. Yeah. And there's medical care given. If you or I went to the hospital without insurance, guess what? We'd get a bill. Yeah. If you're an illegal immigrant, might not have a place to send the bill, so they'll likely never get it. Right. So it's the cost of everything keep going up, and the system has to pay for this.
It's like you almost, not that you want to call anybody dumb for their beliefs, but like everybody should be required, and I guess we are in high school, but like you should be required to like truly understand.
Or even just a civics class to vote,
something.
Man.
Like you should have a genuine understanding of this, and then form your opinion. To know like this happened, this did not work. And you should form an opinion based on that versus just like popping out of nowhere and saying X, Y, Z. And we won't get into like the political side of things. But it just like, it seems so much more clear when you actually study history.
Yeah. And I think that's the real danger. And if you look at what our politicians are doing now, like how many of them do we even like in Congress anymore? And how many of them are actually in there for personal interest versus actually handling the country? So when you look at all three of those things right now, we're not in really good shape. Now, that doesn't mean that we have a third century crisis moment where we have politicians raising armies and attacking each other, though I would love the ghost of Mitch McConnell to raise an army. That might be kind of fun and entertaining to watch. Yeah. We haven't reached that moment yet, and maybe that won't happen here. But I think the thing to watch is, how do the peripheries feel? Do we see places talking about national divorce? Because I've heard that being talked about. Do we hear certain territories talking about splitting off from other states? Because California has been talking about that. And I think those are, it doesn't mean that they mean they're going to happen. But the fact that they're talking about it means that the places that are further from Washington and further from Washington doing them good aren't feeling so good. And if you look at Rome in 260, what happened? They lost half, and they lost half, and they were left with a center. Yeah. So to me, the fact that those narratives are out there are an indicator of how people feel about their situation, and that's not a good indicator.
Yeah. I mean, even if, like you said, even if it's talk, and I think a lot of what goes on in America now is a lot of talk.
Well, Civil War was national divorce. It didn't really work out for anybody.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Lincoln's like, you can't do that.
Right. But again, like you don't learn from these sort of things. The only thing the inflation aspect, and I guess like GDP didn't have as much of an impact because it didn't exist back in the Roman days. So like, yes, your dollar.
Well, our economics is different. That's
your dollar under your mattress. Yes, is way less valued. But assuming you are part of this capitalistic country and you have money in the market, your dollar is worth more than it was. Right.
Right. But let's say that the rest of the world just decides one day, guess what? We're no longer trading for oil in dollars. We're a third world country overnight. So it's a dangerous position to be in. And I guess what makes them do that is the value of the dollar means they accept it anywhere. And if that dollar loses its value, they might stop accepting it. And that's the dangerous slope we're on, is that other countries decide that we're not doing international transfers in dollars, we are screwed.
We should drill for oil.
We could. But you know what we do? We export it to Canada.
Very true.
I read a statistic that we're like one of the top oil exporting countries now, which is kind of interesting.
Really?
Yeah, it's
interesting.
Do you want to look that up, Joe? Our amount of oil exports are going up, which is kind of wild.
Interesting. Huh.
I'll
tell you that.
When we're struggling to kind of, what are the gas prices here in Jersey right now?
Right now, dude. They're like $4 or something.
Yeah, we go to Costco because it's at least a little bit cheaper.
Everything's cheaper. Everything's cheaper at Costco. Just shows that, What do we got, Joe?
We're selling about 10.5 million barrels a day.
Oh,
outside of the US.
What are we importing?
Import.
Why don't we just keep it here?
You would think so.
But
once again, they're private companies. So they're going to go for private interests. At the same time, you can't nationalize them because that's also wrong. But you have to make it so you have to incentivize it so they want to do it here.
Right.
We're total import is about 8 million, and we're selling.
So we sell more than we take in.
So we're exporting more than we're importing.
We're exporting more than
$2 million or $2 billion.
By 2 million barrels a day. That's a lot of
That's
oil.
a lot.
Why? Someone's got to ask these questions.
Yeah. Well,
I don't
and
wanna
once
speak,
again, I know there's qualities of oil and usages of
That
oil.
is, yes,
So
that
I'd,
is-
so
I
I'd
do,
like
yes.
to, I know like you have different types of crude that are used for different things, but at the same time, this is something that should be looked at, right?
Well, that was the big thing about Venezuela. Again, I don't know much either, but that was the big thing about Venezuela, the oil. Is the type and grade of the oil we were getting.
The whole Venezuela thing was interesting though too, because like it's interesting that the president did that before the Iran thing happened. So it's like at least we have another oil source before we attack in the Middle East, which
it was
that kind of telegraphing your shot, I guess.
a bit preemptive. I guess. Listen, I guess you never know.
And we're producing 14 million per day. Because
What?
I think we're drilling now.
But those don't add up.
Oh, we are drilling.
Yeah. So we're importing 5.
Okay. No, not 5, 10.
You said 10.
8.
We're importing.
Export 10.
Exporting 10,
Exporting 10,
importing 8.
importing 8.
Import 8 something. And
that's
we're
13.
Producing maybe ourselves 14.
So we're keeping.
Peak fracking across the Permian and Bahian basin.
So that's in
I don't
Texas.
know. Okay, there you go. They're making 14 million per day over there.
Okay.
Seems like a good thing.
Overall.
Seems like we should be doing more of that.
I guess when you look at it, that when I look at how you actually fix America, right? I guess the number one thing you would take a look at first is you want to de-incentivize political office in the way it's set up. Don't let them trade, term limits, age limits maybe, because
Might be a good one.
we had Lady Lindsey Graham passed away recently, and we had Mitch McConnell is alive or not alive, or depending on what picture you want to look at. There was another woman in Texas that's apparently in elder care, and her daughter has power of attorney over her, but she still votes.
Yeah.
What was the one in California? The senator, not Barbara Boxer, the other one. Anyway, her daughter had power of attorney over her before she passed away a few years, but she was voting.
Yeah.
So like
Age limits should be. I mean, I don't know
should
why
be a
that's
thing, and it really should be a thing. And I think when you look at how our founding fathers wanted government to work, they wanted it to work more like jury duty. You look at someone like John Adams, our second president, served his terms and then went back to a law office. Like it wasn't supposed to be a place that you live
forever.
So I think we need to figure out how to de-incentivize that system. Because what you're getting is people that are going into it for the things they can get. So I think that's one part of it. The other part of it is we need more production and things here in America. We're too reliant on foreign trade.
Yeah.
And we have to figure out what to do with our currency. You know what I mean? I don't know if gold is a solution because we're so far over our skis. I don't know if gold actually helps us anymore. Yeah. But we have to figure out what to do with our currency because we cannot spend money we don't have forever.
Sure. Seems like oil is the answer.
I guess if we
have
start producing, if we have more of it, because we do have it in other places. And I guess here's the struggle, right? If you look at places like Alaska, there's so much oil there, but do you want to destroy the landscape? Because you would. So it is really a balance between how do we produce what we need to, but how do we also keep our other natural resources? So it is a real balance, but we have the ability to achieve energy independence here in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Joe, look up the largest GDPs in the world and the size.
Size of what, the money?
The GDPs of the world, yeah.
We have California and Florida have larger GDPs than some countries.
And that's what people like forget when they talk about inflation is like how big our GDP is.
Yeah.
Are you ready? Yeah. Third one might surprise you only because it surprised me. America, 32.38 trillion.
It's a lot.
China, 20.85.
You gotta say it the right way. China.
Which is a lot less than ours, which is pretty crazy.
You want to take guesses on the third?
Russia.
You want to take a guess?
What were the other ones?
United States and China.
Okay, what was
For
the
number
third?
Yeah. Number 3.
Number 3 for GDP. U.S. and China. I don't think it's going to be Russia.
It's a big leap too, and they're third.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Germany at 5.45
Germany
trillion.
At 5 trillion. All right, give us 4 and 5 too.
4 and 5. Oh man, I gotta ask the thing. Hold on.
That's pretty nuts.
What is he, Chat GPT over there?
It's the Gemini.
It's the Gemini. Okay.
So we have a bigger GDP than the next 4 combined.
Give me the.
But even with that, we're still spending more than we have. So that should also indicate to you likely how much our national debt and gaps.
Well, the ratio does matter way more than the numbers itself.
Yeah,
Like the debt,
the ratio
number,
is
the
extreme.
Yeah, for sure.
Japan, number 4, 4.38 trillion.
And they're dealing with a sovereign debt crisis right now too.
UK, 4.26.
I think that's part of the problem though too, is like it's not just an American problem, it's a global problem. Like our economy has changed the way it's functioned in the last 100 years to now we function off of debt.
Yeah.
And we function off of debt transactions. And I think something like that on a global scale can't go like that forever either, right? Like you're going to implode the global system. And I think that's something that has to be looked at as well. But with so many people benefiting, why would they change something that's benefiting?
Right.
And that gets back to the problem of, are the people in power the ones that should be, right?
Like how long? But I guess like why wouldn't you be able to hypothetically?
Well, at some point in time, like
why?
you or I can't go to our credit card company and say, guess what? I'm just never going to pay my bill and just keep raising my limit. We can't do that. But I don't get how governments can do that. It's extreme.
Because they're big enough. And like what's like the actual concern, right? Like if we don't pay our credit card debt, they can do something physically to us. They can put us in jail.
Yeah.
What is another nation going to do? Put America in jail? Like they're not going to stop
America
trading
has
with
bigger
us.
guns, I guess, than that point in time.
Then like that's again, we have our
So then
spending.
I guess what's the point of the system to begin with? You know,
That's the
where
question.
where does it go? Where
I
does
don't
the
know.
house of cards go?
When they're like, all right, America, pay up, and we're like, nah, and they're like,
I actually heard that there is in your country. There's a revolution, and we should probably go help you with that. We're going to actually send in the
right, like,
Marines.
what are they going to do?
And there's no revolution anymore, and the debt went away. What do you know?
Exactly. So I think that is the biggest. Like your question is probably a question for a lot of people. Is like, what is the eventual?
When it comes to this stuff, man, I'm a layman. Like I know history, I know a lot of these things. I can see patterns, but when I look at modern economics, it's a scary thing because I don't know where it goes.
I think it's almost helpful for us to be laymen because like we see it simple because we can't see it any other way. Like we don't know it complex, but we can see like we have a debt ratio that seems to be a problem.
Isn't it that our GDP doesn't even service the interest on our debt at this point in time?
I think it does. Joe, can you look it up? I know it's not like a running tab. People think that debt is like a running tab that we can eventually pay off. Like that's not how debt in this country works if we're still producing. So it is, again, more focused on the ratio. And I think that's why it's not as big of a deal as people think it is because of how high and big our GDP is. Check if the GDP services the debt. I'm going to have an economist on this podcast.
Yeah, we're like in all hypotheticals now.
Because like we're all just like fucking shooting straight. And that's where like we are the first people to admit that we're not like we have a general understanding.
Because I think here's the thing, when you try to admit that you know everything about everything, you can't admit your own flaws.
No,
and you can't see them.
We will never do that.
Yeah.
Tax revenue and government receipts are used to pay down and service the public debt. GDP serves as a measure of total economic output and the income base available to generate those taxes.
So are we meeting the obligation?
But like you said, like what happens if we don't?
Yeah, because
I guess the other side is true. Like also, what is the benefit too?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like if this gigantic number is $40 trillion, whatever the debt is, like what is the point of paying off $1 trillion?
I guess it brings us to, does any of it matter?
I don't know. That again, like what is our value? What is our dollar value based on? You know what I mean?
But does it cause a civilizational collapse, or where does it go? Because if you look at history, it's caused a civilizational collapse. At some point the system breaks, and you have to wonder what is the. It can't go on forever. At some point, a system collapses.
What is the future of the world? Like, then you start getting to like, what is the future of the world? Do we all become a utopia and we're all like happily ever after, or do we continue to?
Well, I think what you end up seeing is you see what you see throughout history. You see what you saw with Rome. I think it doesn't become the big system that people think about. It becomes more local. Like you see, places are unable to control places further away from them, and you get them getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and then eventually they get bigger and bigger and bigger again. It's like a system of they get to a certain point, they collapse down, they build up again, they get to a certain point, they collapse down, and it's just a pattern that continues. Yeah,
I mean, because think about it, if like we didn't care, let's say Minnesota like revolted and like became their own state, and they fled from the U.S. like. That wouldn't be taken seriously until they started invading other states and like taking over, and then the military would have to step in.
Well, it's like you look throughout history, like the Pope builds up the papal states collapse, become part of the Kingdom of Italy. You look at parts of the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Emperor controlled a lot of Europe. He wasn't king of everything, but he controlled a lot of it. Eventually, the office of Holy Roman Emperor doesn't exist anymore. The Soviet Union builds up, but eventually it collapses into satellite nations, and Russia and a bunch of satellites. So we see these things happen throughout history. You have to think at some point in time those patterns repeat. We just don't know what those, I guess, crack lines look like.
That's a good way to put it.
Like where do things actually break, and then where do they reform? Because those things will happen, but they might take hundreds of years to get there.
Right. And it also seems like we are focusing on the right things though. Like every politician talks about whether or not they prioritize
but it's lip service. They don't actually care about it.
Right. Well, I mean, Border Patrol and immigration laws.
Well, yeah, we got to a certain point, right? We definitely have. Is it enough? I don't think so. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
And then what happens in, 2 years we have left in this presidential term? What happens in 2 years? That's the question.
No clue. That is a big question.
So. Because that also because the question people often ask me is America a republic or is America an empire, right? And I look at how, like, to me, 1913 is a very pivotal year because there's three things that happen that year. The Federal Reserve Act happens. The 17th Amendment passes. The 17th Amendment means that state legislatures no longer select the Senate. They're selected by popular vote. So essentially the House and the Senate do the same thing. And the other thing is the Income Tax Amendment. And if you look at, since that point, the executive branch has started to outweigh the other branches of government. Like, it started to outweigh the judicial and the legislative branches. So we've gotten more and more and more to the executive or the presidential position being imperial. And if you look at things being done by executive order, I think that's the alarming part, right?
Right.
You look at, there was a number that I think it was like Bush did more executive orders than every president before him combined, and then Obama beat him, and then Trump beat, and then Biden beat him, and then Trump beat him. And the problem is, then every 4 years, everything just gets reversed,
right? It's
because
like,
we're not creating
anywhere.
laws, we're creating executive actions that function while that person's in power or their party's in
And it's
power.
taken away the next time,
right? And that's a weird position to be in, right? Because then it's just every 4 years, if the person changes, the laws change, and that's a weird position to be in.
It is, in like 4 years. Then that's the slippery slope too, is like 4 years isn't that long.
Yeah.
So now extend it to 8 years, and then 8 years isn't that long. Let's do 12. And now you have this issue of running into what could be seen as like a dictatorship. And people do, like, America is seen as this democratic nation, but like, is it? Like, do we have this facade?
Well, it doesn't
that
really, it's not a functional republic anymore, right? Because if you look at it, you know, in a lot of ways after 1913, we disintegrated the direct democracy, because only the people have a say, states don't have a say, right? Like, the purpose of the Senate was, California is way bigger than New Jersey, but New Jersey and California were supposed to have the same amount of voice as members of the union, and they don't anymore. Yeah. It's just done by popular vote. And I think what you've seen happen since then is the executive's gotten so powerful that now a lot of times things are just being done by the executive, with or without Congress, with or without the Supreme Court. You know, it's a lot of times you see, doesn't matter what president is, doing certain actions and waiting to see if the Supreme Court stops them. Yeah. So it's a weird position to be in, where our system has disintegrated a lot.
Interesting to look at. It's helpful to talk to the historian.
And like, once again, it's devoid of who the executive at the top is, because both parties have done the same thing. Yeah.
So I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah.
And I guess leave your comments below what you think the history or the future of America looks like. Thank you. This was great. Actually, I've always been intrigued by this. I appreciate
it. I definitely made some mistakes, and I hope that we get people to go out there. As I said earlier, my goal is to get people to go out there and read a book for themselves, or read a primary source, or look at a documentary, but to understand, like, question everything around you. Yeah. Learn for yourself. Don't take me as the source. You know, go out there and check it out.
If you could drop maybe like 2 or 3 books that you would recommend reading for the Roman Empire history.
So I would actually recommend something different. I'm a big fan of great courses. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but I wish I was. There's 2 that are really good. One by Dr. Gregory Aldretti. I don't remember the exact name of the course. It's something to do with the Roman Empire, but if you look up his name, you'll find it. The other is by a historian named Garrett Fagan, who is incredibly funny. He passed on a few years ago, but I would look up those 2 courses, and you would learn everything you could ever need to learn about Rome to coherently understand a lot of these arguments.
Cool.
And also modernly, one of my favorite writers, Dr. Adrian Goldsworthy, I actually got a chance to interview him about the life of Caesar. Great writer. He's actually literary by background, so his books are actually interesting, which is cool.
Sounds good. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on. This is great. Appreciate that, man. That's it for today, everybody. Like, subscribe, and share. Peace.